start the recording. And for the attendees, if they are going to want to comment this evening, please let me know in the chat box. That's what I got.
Perfect, thank you. All right, with that then, we'll call the meeting of the Beaverton Traffic Commission to order. It is Thursday, June 3rd, 7:04. And we will remind everyone that this is being recorded and this is a workshop, but public information and public notice. So if you do make a comment, it is part of the public record. We ask that you do state your name, address, and pertinent information when and if you are called upon. With that in mind then, first up, staff comments, Mr. Khasho.
Yeah, I just sent an additional written testimony that we received after we mailed the packet. I hope you all saw it.
Yes, thank you. I did.
Yes. Right. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Very good. Next would be the consent items.
I was going to say, Ernie, I think we needed to do the roll call.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. All right, then. Well done. We'll do the roll call then for record, and we do need a verbal communication on that. Thank you. Commissioner Bobadilla?
Present.
Commissioner McClean? Or Vice Chair?
Present.
Commissioner Nakamura?
Here.
Commissioner Urbanski?
Present.
And Chair Conway is present. Commissioner Brown is no longer on our aim, and Commissioner Moore is currently absent. We'll see if there's power outage. She may show up later on. So for right now, she is not present.
Oh, she just sent me an email. She's having a hard time, but she's trying really hard to get logged in.
Perfect. All right, we will continue though in the interim though. And with that, now we have everyone on board. Next would be the consent items. The only thing on our agenda is the meeting minutes from the last time Commission met, May 6, 2021. I was not at the meeting, so I will abstain from making any motions regarding that.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from last meeting.
Okay, Commissioner or Vice Chair McClean made a motion. Second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Bobadilla, second. Thank you. Roll call then for that. Commissioner Bobadilla?
Yay. Sorry.
Thank you. Vice Chair McClean?
Yes.
Commissioner Nakamura?
Yes.
Commissioner Urbanski?
Yes.
All right, and Commissioner Moore is not present, and Chair Conway is abstain. So that motion passes. Thank you. Next up, the only thing on our agenda this evening is a workshop. This is a continuation of the traffic calming workshop discussion that we had the last time. Well, not the last time, but on our March 4th, 2021 meeting. We did not meet in April, and there was a different item on May. At that meeting, we did have several discussions and came to the conclusion we would like to send this out to the BCCI, who had some representatives here, so that they could make some discussions and come back with some solutions and recommendations, as well as discuss with the NAC, since this was considered to be a citywide issue and more than just one NAC or one traffic calming issue. With that in mind, I do know that City Council had a presentation, some other NACs had their meetings. And with that in mind then, I was going to make some initial comments, but Mr. Khasho is going to recap that for us first. Sir?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Actually, this process started 2019, the end of 2019, and in 2020, it was decided to form a subcommittee to change the traffic calming process. But due to the pandemic, that committee never moved forward and there was no action taken. In March this year, or the March 4th meeting of the Traffic Commission, we had the workshop. And the workshop was to go over the traffic calming process And the intent of the workshop was to get the new traffic commissioners familiarized with the traffic calming program. And at that workshop, also there was discussions about the process, specifically about the polling the plan. You know, some people call it voting, but I'd like to emphasize we poll the plan. It's not a vote as, you know, election voting. Polling the plan, and we like to always get the residents' preference on the plan. They agree with the plan or not, or disagree. Because sometimes when people talk about voting, you know, they start getting into the voting rules, and it gets a little complicated. I like to keep it simple and call it polling. And there was discussion about it at the March 4th meeting. And during the discussion, many ideas were thrown at the commissioners, but then at the end, after the deliberation or discussion of the program, decision was made that we will ask the Beaverton Committee on Community Involvement to go out and reach for the NACs and get input from the NACs on what they think of the process and what they need to be changed. And at the time, Chairman Conway said, we'll give you a few months and you'll come back with the results. Since March 4th meeting, city staff or public works engineering staff did a presentation or a roundtable with the city councilors. And that was on May 4th. It was a quick presentation and we got some feedback from city councilors. The main thing is the city council is interested in changing the polling, again, I'll say voting process, and look at that percentage and look at a different way to do it. And the reason why it is very important to the city council and to the residents, the traffic calming program is very important to everyone. And that's why they want it to be successful and look into changing the polling process. Other issues that was mentioned at the city council was they thought that some of the projects don't move forward because of lack of funding. We never had this problem. We always had funding to move projects forward. But also we have to realize that, you know, we have limited number of staff and we cannot just hire 2 engineers just to do traffic calming for 2 projects so they'll move quicker. You know, that's another thing we have to keep in mind. But council is willing to increase funding if needed to move any project forward. There was some concerns about if the votes are anonymous or not. That's why I don't call it a vote. And anything we do with the city, with this program, it's all public record. So anybody could public record request and ask for the information about anything from this program or anything we do in traffic operation. This happened once to me. I was working on the Carr Street neighborhood traffic calming project. And one of the neighbors, he was an attorney, and he put a record request for what happened, how the project got in, how we got to that point. Basically, any emails I had about anything to deal with Carr Street was given out. All the paperwork I had, my folders, I just gave it to the city attorney. Here it is. That's all I have, you know. So anybody could get, you know, put a public record request and request any information, how we went through the process. As I mentioned at the previous workshop, in the past, I had people coming to the front desk. They say, I don't believe you got that, you know, approval rate that's required. So basically I had to pull all the cards I got back and I had them separated, yes, no, abstain, here's the cards. You know, I can't tell them no. So they basically at the time, you know, they flipped through it, how many yeses, count them, and and that was it. The concern is, some people are concerned about if they vote no or if they vote yes, can people look what they, ask for what they voted on. I never had anybody asking me what did this neighbor vote, or I never was asked this question before, and I've been doing this for 23 years. It never happened, but potentially it could happen. So they're looking at ways where we could keep these votes anonymous. And I think this is not up to me. It's all depend on what the laws and rules are. So we have to work with the city attorney, how we could, what we could do to make it anonymous. Is it possible to do it or not? So we'll be looking into this too. So those were the main concerns of the city council at that May 4th meeting. So today, like I said in the previous workshop, we were waiting for the BCCI to come back with recommendations. And tonight, there is a PowerPoint presentation from the BCCI, and they want to go over the comments and information they collected from the NACs. So we're going to hear from them, and potentially there could be people who want to speak. Plus, there was a whole bunch of written testimony. I hate to call it testimony. It's not a hearing, but it is written comments from other residents that we received. And I did forward you all these comments. Going through the comments, the main concern of almost every comment we got was the polling percentage. So they all have concerns about the polling percentage. That was one. There was some comments that we need to look at other traffic calming devices. But we do look at that. And we ask, when we work on developing the plan, we work with the residents. This is what we could have here. We divide basically the street that they requested traffic calming on, like 300-foot sections, because that's how traffic calming devices work best when they're spaced at 300 feet. So that's what we do, and is we divide the street to 300-foot sections, and we got to the point where that 300 feet is, and we asked the neighbors, these are the options what you could have on that location. Sometimes you're limited to the options, and probably you are mid-block. You could have an example. If you are mid-block, you could have a curb extension there, or you could have a median island, or you could have a speed bump or a speed hump. So we give these three options and we say, okay, what would you like to see there? Sometimes during this process, we have, if some say, okay, we want a speed hump, some say, I want an island. We could have two options. We go forward with having two options. What happens, for example, we say curb extensions or median island, we say, okay, if you have this option, then you need to take the parking away. So we'll have the space to include the median island or curb extensions. And the minute you say, I want to take parking, most of the time, especially if there are homes facing the street, they tell you, no, I don't want this. I don't want to use the parking in front of my home. So what do we end up with? We end up with the speed hump. So we don't impose any devices on residents. We just give the choice, give the choices we have, and they pick whichever choice they like to go with. Although sometimes people disagree and tell you, no, I don't want to lose parking. Sometimes we keep that option moving forward. But at the end, they have to decide, which option they're going to go with. And it could be multiple devices too. But at the end, people who attend the meeting will decide which option they're going to go with. And that's the plan that we take out to poll or vote. That's how we deal with selecting devices. So from the comments, people saying, oh, we need to have traffic circles and other devices. We encourage residents to have a mix of devices, because you add the mix, it works best. It's not as harsh as speed humps alone. But sometimes people tell you, I don't care. I'd rather have speed humps and reduce the amount of traffic on my street than having a nice, good-looking median island planted. Sometimes we have to go with whatever the residents need. And that's how we pick up the plan. As I mentioned before, staff does not impose any devices on any location or any street. It's working with those neighbors on picking the devices and, you know, what they like to see on the street. So for example, the example I just mentioned, when you send the plan, let's say the majority of the presidents who attended the meeting say, I want the speed hump option, and some like the median. Okay, we can go with one plan. It's just the speed humps, and we send it to vote, and the rest, you know, they don't want it, or because it's in front of their home. Sometimes they go out and advocate not to approve the plan. It happened before. But with COVID, I don't know what's happening, how things are going. I don't know what people do, to be honest with you. In the past, we used to send the packet, which I call the packet, which includes the plan that was selected, a card which has 3 options on it, yes, no, or abstain, and the cover letter. And it's clearly in the cover letter and on the card. It says, you know, if you don't mail the card, it's a no vote. It's clearly say it. But recently, I don't know why people don't return the cards, although we have a pre-stamped envelope too with it. It's all what it takes. Just check the box and sign it, and we'll accept it and drop it in the mail. It just there is hesitation in returning the cards. I think also we need to look at other methods, how to reach out to people, you know, to make them respond. Can we do it electronically? I'm sure there is some technology that you could do, but how easy? It's how you reach out to the people to let you, for example, get their email, to send them a request to, you know, to check the box, basically. That will be another issue. You know, how do we get the emails of people? How do we connect with them? Sometimes at meetings, people don't like to write their phone number or their address. They just sign that they were in, and that's it. So it's really hard to decide why people are not sending them back, or how we need to look at other ways, but is it gonna work or not? So we'll be looking at those two. But tonight, focus on this workshop. We need to look how we could improve that approval rate of the plan. What can we do? From the staff side and from what we heard from the city council, I think we need to reduce the percentage. Instead of using the 67%, potentially make it just simple majority, 51%. And still use the same process. Because you look at the projects that they did not make it, there's a couple that they were close to 50%. One was 50, not 51. So unless the commissioners feel any different, we're open to this too. I'm just suggesting that 51 probably is a good starting point. I have some, I think in the previous workshop, I did send you a table that contained how many cards were sent for the projects that failed. And I could go over a few of those if you'll just give me a second here.
And Mr. Khasho, while you're doing that, could you make a clarification that the 67% or the percent that is ultimately decided on is the percentage of the of the addresses and properties that are impacted, correct?
Yeah, let me, I'll go over which residents could vote or will receive a response card or not. The way the process works is to start a traffic calming program on the street. We require a petition, and the requester need to collect signatures from 51% of the people who live on the street, because the way the request starts is somebody calls in and say, okay, I want traffic calming on First Street between Watson and Stott. We say, okay. So let's say, they go through the process, we do a speed study and they qualify. The minute they qualify, we ask for 51% of the people who live on the street to say, yes, we're going to start the process. That's in phase 1. And typically, we don't go to the side streets or anything. It's just people who live on the street. That's how the program is written. So we ask them that to get 51% of the neighbors agreeing or signing the petition saying, yeah, we're going to start the process. Those are easy to get. I mean, I have very, very seldom you'll see one that didn't make it. Or sometimes people doesn't want to go around and get the signatures, and they give up and say, I don't have the time. It happens, but not as, doesn't happen as often as we think. So that's how the process starts. That's the first 51% saying, yeah, we want to start the process. And then past that, we bring the projects to the Traffic Commission for ranking. And we rank the projects and we work with the top 2 or 3 projects on the ranking list due to staff time and also the amount of funding that's available. But most of the time, it's the staff that's available to do these projects too, and the public involvement process. It takes a long time. So that's how we pick the projects. Then the next phase after the ranking, we go to the neighborhood meetings and coming up with the plan. And the way they vote on the plan, we look, sometimes those limits that start at the petition process get expanded a little bit because you started, splitting the street on 300-foot sections, and then it gets a little longer sometimes. So you add more addresses to it. Also, the process says you have to go 250 feet from the last traffic calming device on each end. So we add all the addresses within 250 feet at each end of the street. Also, they say the process says you have to go 250 feet on the side street. So every side street, we go in 250 feet, we measure 250 feet, and we add those addresses that are within that 250 feet. So the number of residents involved in the process gets larger than the first petition, that the 51% petition. So that you get more people involved with the voting on the plan than the beginning of the process. We require 67% in the area that I just described. 67% of the people who live in this area to say yes to the plan. That's how the current process is. And if, for example, we send out 100 cards, 67 cards must come back with a yes checked on it. People could vote no. If they abstain, we'll take that one abstain, let's say, then the percentage will be based on 99 cards, not 100, because one was abstained. No's are counted no's, no return cards are counted no. So basically we require 67% of the cards that go out to come back with a yes. So my suggestion is that 67%, maybe we need to make it simple majority, 51%. That's my suggestion. It's just a suggestion, and whatever you could come up with, we'll discuss and we'll take a look at. I just want to go over some of a few projects that they did not make the 67% in the last couple years.
Jabra, can I ask you some questions about what you just gave, or do you want me to hold off?
Sure. Yeah, sure.
Can I ask right now, or do I hold off? It's up to you. Can you just?
No, sure, you can. Go ahead.
Okay. So my understanding there right now is that it's 51% of the people on the street that want to have the traffic improvement. And then it grows up to 250 people from the left, from the right at the end. So I get the number grows, right?
Yes.
As it grows. And then from that final number tally, you need to get 67% of those to respond yes in order for the project to go forward.
Yes.
I guess what bothers me right now here is, why are we worrying about, and please tell me, about those people on the left, 250, about those people 250 on the right, and even after crossing the traffic, calming traffic that we may have, that number keeps growing, but we don't even consider them initially as to whether they even care about having this project.
True, but the reason the process was done this way is the most people are affected by those traffic calming devices, typically are within that range, similar to the spacing. That's why they say, okay, those people are, they drive on the street, they're affected by the noise, they're affected by other things that traffic calming devices has. So that's why they're included. If you wish to change the project area, that's another option. But from recent meetings we've been for traffic calming, people actually want to add more. They think everybody should be involved with it.
But not everybody's responding. Each time we add more people, it seems to be that we get less response, it's less effective. The people that really want it and are putting the time in are the ones that initiate at the beginning, and it seems to be that their real concern is getting ignored by more people we add, because they're not caring. I hate to say it, they're not.
Yeah, it becomes more challenging, and we warn residents about it at the meetings. We say, hey, you increase it, the chance of people not responding will be greater than what it is, with the project area. Yes, I agree with you.
I think, Jabra, we'd like to point out too, that I think if you would follow up on that, as Vice Chair McClean has seen as well, there is the concern about the same as parking. People want no parking on their street because they don't want people to park there. We put that in and it just moves down the street. So one concern I think that we need to point out, and I hope was in some of the historical data that you're going to show, Mr. Khasho, is that it's more than just the street though, Commissioner Bobadilla, because if the concern is that there's speeding or cut through, they're going to go somewhere else. And we just can't say, oh, okay, that was one of the things that we've seen before. And I think that's one of the concerns that initially had come up. Is that not warranted, I think, by the data, Mr. Khasho?
The cut through and moving traffic to some other street, we take care of it during implementing the plan. Because if we feel traffic will be shifting, let's say we have a parallel street that traffic will shift over to. So we do include that street in the plan. So here the project gets even little wider than how we started, because there is a shift in traffic. And the program says if there is like 20% shift, or increase in traffic due to the traffic calming devices, then we have to treat that street. And we did this, for example, on Haystack in South Beaverton. There was a parallel street just to Haystack it connects actually haystack from one end to the other. They said, okay, residents who live on that street said traffic will shift to our street then to avoid the speed humps. And what we ended up doing is including that street as part of the plan. And also they had to vote on the plan too. So yes, if there is a shift of traffic, we treat those streets. And I believe some of the comments you received, they talked about, shifting traffic. Although anywhere we feel there will be a shift in traffic, we'll include those streets as part of the plan. So it's just people venting and commenting.
Jabra, one more question regarding that what you mentioned just a few minutes ago. Ranking. I understand that it comes back to the commission and we rank, etc. How long is the ranking good for? I'm just curious. Like, how long do we keep it? Do these people have to go through this process every 2 years?
Yeah, the process says it has to stay on the ranking list up to 4 years. But if there is a street that shows they rank higher than a project that was on the ranking list in the previous year, that project will bump it and go before the previous project because there is more need. That's why it's set this way. The focus is on treat the most problematic streets with speeding and cut through traffic.
You mentioned earlier also that the council was willing to provide more resources if needed to move projects along. Can you expand on that? What does that mean?
Because council heard from, to be honest, I don't know exactly where, there was some comments that due to funding projects were not going through. And we never rejected the project. We went through the list. It might have taken longer, but we treated every project on the list.
And I think I saw some in the packet too. Some people mentioned that, but I'm just curious, what did council mean by they are willing to provide more resources, as in staff to go through more of these projects, or what? What I got from the comment is if we need more funding to move projects a little quicker or to fund projects so they'll go through, that's what I understood, that they're willing to find the funding to support the program. As I mentioned, it might need more staff to do the work if you take on like 4 or 5 projects. But recently, we haven't been getting that many. I mean, anytime every year we get 2 or 3 and we work with them and they move forward. I haven't, funding is never a problem, to move the projects forward. But what I mentioned is that City Council is willing to increase the funding for the traffic calming program. That's what I heard. And I have one more question, and then I'll let my other fellow commissioners ask. I've asked a lot already. Sorry. My other question is regarding, you know what? I think you answered. That's fine. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Boudia. Commissioner Moore had a question, and then Commissioner Urbanski. Commissioner Moore.
Commissioner Moore.
Thank you, Ernie. Hello, everyone. Jabra, I was curious and I think my questions are interrelated, so I'll try to be as succinct, as clear as I can with my question. My understanding is that the way that our traffic calming program is currently set up was not a brainchild of our city. We copied, for the most part, a model that already existed. And that was what the explanation I recall getting about part of why a no is counted as, a non-vote is counted as a no, is because that's the way the initial model was set up. I'm curious as to whether we have access to any of their successes as well as failures, and how they're going about following up if they're having a similar problem. I recognize that each city, because each neighborhood is different, but each city is different too. And I was just curious as to whether they're seeing a similar type of feedback, because I feel like our neighborhoods are getting very frustrated with the system as it stands, which is why we're getting a lot of the feedback that we're getting from the city commissioners as well as from the constituents as well. Do you have any insight to share regarding that, or?
Yeah, the program, it wasn't just copied at the time when the program was developed. Yes, research was done nationally and internationally, you know, on how do we deal with the traffic calming program. And the reason why the program came to existence, before the program, you know, people used to call and they'll say, we need traffic calming. And there wasn't any thresholds or speed thresholds or traffic, or people just complained about cars passing by, speeding. And, you know, sometimes they pushed it too much and they ended up having speed humps and other things too. But then at the time, the city started thinking, if this is gonna keep going on, it's getting too expensive at the time. And also sometimes it's not needed, and it's not needed to be to the extent that they were doing it. So they started looking on, okay, we need to come with a program that it will focus on problematic streets where we need the treatment. And that's how the program got created. And at the time, the Traffic Commission worked on the program, and they had many meetings and they developed the program. We got information from all over, but it was massaged to fit the city needs. And there are many cities and counties that they follow exactly our program till now. There is some cities who started following ours and then they reduced it. I don't have the information with me at this time, but a couple of years ago, I did bring this information to the commission, and we went over it to see what other cities do. Most of them, they were close to our program. Some were just 51%. They changed it, dropped it down to 51%. That's the history of how we came up, you know, how the process got evolved and where we're at this time. We did update the program a couple of times, and but nothing was changed for the percentage for the plan. Those stayed the same. Before we used to do just, you know, do speed study, and whatever the speed study at that time will say, we'll just say, okay, you qualify or you don't qualify. The Traffic Commission changed the program to require a full week of collecting data on speed and traffic volume. So we do the whole week. I mean, before we also did 7 days, sometimes 5 days, but it was set in stone that you have to do a week. Because sometimes people will say, hey, like let's say we did Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, we didn't do Friday or the weekend. Then they'll say, okay, you did not capture the speeding and during the weekend on Sunday or Saturday. We couldn't argue this. So we have to go back and do a week. So the commission decided that we require to do the whole week. Also, the commission modified the response card too, the language on it and the language on the letter, and we changed those too. So there was some improvement, but we never touched on the 67% requirement because we never had this problem before. We never had this. We did 25 traffic calming projects. Didn't have any issue with it. I remember one project got 66%. That's 167th Avenue north of Walker Road. And they couldn't get that 1%, and the Traffic Commission denied the project. So let me, yeah, I think Commissioner Urbanski had a question.
Yeah, thank you.
Jabra, so I have a question which many of the residents are also asking, and that is, why does a non-returned card count as a no rather than an abstain? Because, you know, if somebody is not going to send in their card even after several reminders, they shouldn't be given the vote. And it makes a big difference. For example, in the Wilson Avenue case, I think it was 58% said yes, and so it didn't make the 67%. But if you count that percentage of yes votes as the number of return votes, it comes out at 70%, in which case it would have passed. So doesn't that make more sense to do that?
Yeah, the reason this idea was, you know, included in the program is at the time, lots of people were against traffic calming and speed humps. So they wanted to make sure that everybody who lives on the street are convinced that they need these devices on the streets. That's why the percentage is high. Some cities, because it's from the previous experience they had, and I'm talking, you know, 20, 25 years ago. It's not just yesterday. Some cities installed speed humps. After they did the installation, people said, no, I don't want it. We never asked for these. So they ended up taking them out. So that's why the percentage is set high, is they want to make sure that residents who live on the street are convinced with those devices and they wanted them in.
No, I understand, but surely if people are not returning the cards, then they're not voting one way or the other. So they shouldn't have any say. I mean, they've been given the opportunity, and then the people who really care one way or the other, their votes are counting. That's what most of the responses are, and I can see the logic.
Yeah, but like I said, they want to make sure that residents are okay with the project, and they want it in. That's why it's high. Although, you know, yeah, you don't send your cards, it's an automatic no. As I mentioned, this wasn't a problem before. This is just in the last 3-4 years we're having this problem more than before. The reason why I think also we have this you know, lack of returning cards is getting more problematic is due to the fact that in previous years, we treated the most severe areas. I mean, streets that truly has a speeding problem, that has cut through traffic, that so people were willing, you know, to do anything, just do something about it. That's why the response was high. But now, sometimes, I mean, even in the meetings, you see people are kind of borderline. You know, they're not convinced that they need them. Some, as much as, you know, as I mentioned before in previous discussions too, you asked at the meeting, you know, if you would like to have speed humps, please raise your hand or we'll do a count. And everybody will raise their hand and say, yes, I want speed humps. Okay, we go through the process, and like I mentioned, how we do the plans and the options. But the minute that speed hump is in front of somebody's home or at the borderline with his home, they change their mind. So that's why that percentage was set high, to make sure that what goes on the street, people are convinced and will be happy about it.
Okay, but I heard you earlier say you're proposing to reduce it to 51%. So isn't that the opposite argument?
But still, it's at least the simple majority. You know, that's what I'm trying to find, a happy medium that we could get.
I guess what the residents are saying, that most of them, I think, from the letters I've read, they'd probably be okay with the 67% if it was 67% of the returned votes. It would still be high that everybody has to agree, but people who really care one way or the other.
Okay, that's why I want to go over the data just of the numbers, and I will show you why I'm still not convinced that it needs to be 51 of what gets returned. Let me go through these numbers and maybe it will become more clear. Just 1 second.
Thank you.
Okay, I wanna do 130th Avenue. That was in 2018. And this is the first one that failed from that time. We sent out 93 cards. And what we got back is 36 yes, 21 no, and 1 abstain. So based on the percentage of the yes cards, they only got 38.7%. So we got back 57 cards out of 93. So if you're going to do this 67%, you know, out of this, that will be, or 51% of what got back, then this is only, I'll say probably it's let me do the calculations here.
While you're doing that, Mr. Khasho, I just want to add to Commissioner Urbanski. I think 2 points. We can decide what we want as a commission. We can, you know, brainstorm and suggest any solution. I think your question, Mr. Urbanski, is the traffic calming does not have a minimum number of respondents. So, for example, if we send out 100, 4 say yes and 3 say no. Do we want 7 people deciding for 100 residents? So there isn't a minimum currently in the traffic calming. So I think, you know, we could always discuss having a 2-phase type of poll where we have a minimum respondents versus just a simple majority, or like Mr. Khasho was saying, 51% of the residents or the people that are affected to get the cards would have to be yes. So I think there's that 2 parts of that, you know, discussion, because do you want, you know, 7 people out of 100 deciding if those are the only people that voted? Also, we've talked about this before, and just to kind of throw that out there while Mr. Khasho is getting his numbers. The card says if you do not respond, it's a no. We don't know why people respond or don't respond. They might read that. It's like, oh, I don't want this to happen, you know, and I don't really like to use it, you know, recent examples. Overall, a lot of these comments have passed, but it's not just because people don't vote. It's also because people said, no, they did not want that. So I think that the history behind the 67% is we wanted, or I mean, it was before I was on the commission, but the calming wanted a majority of people to say, yes, we want this installed. So we're not spending money, taking it back out, and, you know, wasting taxpayers even more. But I think that's the history behind that 67%. It's a clear and obvious majority of the residents want this to happen. Now we're, you know, in the last recent years, we're finding where we're not getting that. You know, it's 51% or 38%. Some people are just not voting, and some people are voting no. So then it's like, how do we, you know, help those neighborhoods that find it as a necessity to have calming? Or why is it people are voting no? Is it because they agree with there's a need, but they don't like the solutions of the types of calming? Or do they just don't think it's a need to have actual calming? So I think those are discussions, you know, going forward would be really helpful. Sorry, Mr. Khasho, go ahead.
No, thank you. And sorry, Vice Chair McClean, I did not see the hand raised.
Oh, no worries.
So on that, but one follow-up for Commissioner Urbanski as well on that too. That discussion did come up in 2015, and it's come up a couple of times. I've been on this commission 10 years now. And Commissioner Beatty and Commissioner Henderson had a very good debate and discussion, and we had a lot of things about there's no minimum requirement, right? So if you didn't count that and you sent out 100 ballots and 10 of them came back and 6 people said yes, then, or 7, then those 7 would make a decision for everything. What if 4 votes came back and 3 of them were right and 1 of them was no? You would have met that as well. And so 3 people would have done that. We did not discuss changing the minimum number of ballots needed. But we did discuss that because the way everything was written, that we were hesitant. I believe Commissioner McClean was there as well. We were hesitant to change it without having some trigger or mechanism that said you've got to have some minimum number of votes. That's why I think it's key to point out it's not it's not the number of no's that are getting out there, it's the number of yeses that are needed. And how do we contain that? Every time we've had this discussion, we've not taken it lightly, and it has been, it really has come down to that. How do you balance the number of votes that you need to pass with a minimum number of making sure that everyone has their voice heard for whatever reason? And that went into, was it the side streets? Was it not? Was it the people on the street? And some of them, protecting the privacy was a question that came back. That was one reason. Maybe they voted no because they not returning your ballot. Nobody knows what I did or what I said, but my voice was heard, right? So we've had some very good discussions about that, and I think today, in the last couple of years, that it's time to revisit that again. But that's definitely one of the conversations that we've gone round and round about that. And it was unfortunate that in the last, I think, 3 discussions to that, very minimal community input during those discussions. And we had several workshops, and we had some discussions, like, I think, to Mr. Khasho's credit, that we did not hear that kind of input. We heard a couple of people who would go through. One gentleman went through very detailed overall about every single point in the entire thing, but it was a very limited amount of feedback. So I appreciate Mr. Khasho taking this on and going through it. And Mr. Khasho?
Yeah, I think Commissioner McClean explained what I was trying to do and explain. I was just trying to bring numbers, and he made it very simple, and thank you for doing this. Yeah, that option, maybe, I mean, here we're just throwing ideas. Don't take what I say that's what I want, or that's, my opinion doesn't mean anything. I think, yeah, requiring a certain minimum number or minimum percentage of cards coming back, and then decide on a percentage of those. That's another way to do it. And I think it's valid and it makes sense. It just, we need some consensus from commissioners, how they feel about it. Also, I think after you hear people who are going to testify and a presentation from the BCCI, maybe it will shed some light too. And let's take it a step at a time, and we'll get there. And that's all I have as a starting of the workshop.
Did you have one other? Did you have any other counts? I thought that I thought that there was a chart that had the numbers that Mr. Chow had put together. I'm trying to. I thought there was a presentation
from last
that had the grid with some of the. As I think that was the question: how many would have passed had we lowered it to, or how many would still have failed? And I believe the one at 4950 would have. The other ones would have passed.
Yeah, here I'll give you the percentages. Just yeah, I'll go one by one. For example, 130th Avenue, they just got 38%, 38.7. So, I mean, you look at this one, it's probably a hopeless case, because there was 36 yes and 21 no's. I've never seen so many no's, kind of almost, I'll say 30, 70. Wilson Avenue, they got 43.94%, 44%. And we sent out 132 cards. We got 58 yes, 17 no, and 6 abstain. Sexton Mountain Drive, this one made it, and that was in 2019. We sent out 46 cards. Sorry, we sent out 71. 53 came back with a yes, 5 no, and 3 abstain. It passed, they made 74.5%, 75%. So it passed. Barlow Road, we sent out 83 cards. We got back 41 yes, 6 no, and 3 abstain. So that's 49.5. Bonnie Bray Street, we sent out 78 cards. We got 39 yes, and 5 no, and 3 abstain. So it got 50%. But those Bonnie Bray, Barlow, and Wilson, Bonnie Bray and Barlow were during the pandemic, and we did everything by mail. We sent the cards out 3 times. And let me here just tell you how many times and what we got back. Wilson Avenue, the first attempt, we sent 132 cards, and we didn't get enough back. So we looked at who did not return their cards, and there was 97 addresses out of the 132 that did not return their cards. So we did a second attempt, and we didn't make it. Barlow Road, first attempt at the first time, 83 cards. And we did the second attempt, we sent out 43. So 43 addresses did not return their cards. And we did the third attempt. Out of the 43, we got 10 back only. So we tried the third time and we sent out 33. And the project did not make it. Bonnie Bray, first attempt was 78 cards. Second attempt, 56. So it means we only got back 22 cards out of the 78. The third attempt, we sent out 31. So it means from the second attempt, we only got the 25 cards, and it did not make it. So this is the frustrating part. Is we tried 3 times, and you would think that people will get the message and send their cards, but I don't know why they don't send them. I'm not. I wish I know why. That's the frustrating part.
So thank you, Commissioner Urbanski, and then I have a follow-up question to that, and then we'll.
My assumption would be that the people who are living on the affected street, the ones that are more likely to return the cards and to vote yes. And as you move away into the side streets, you're going to get residents who are less directly affected. And so they're either not going to return their cards or vote no, in which case it's the same thing. Do you have can you look at the returns and provide some statistics? Is that in fact the case? Because if it is, then it makes a big difference where you set that 250-foot zone. If you set it to 200, for example, you might start seeing more yeses. If you set it to 300, you may see even more no's. I mean, do you have that kind of analysis that you can do on the returned cards?
We can go through it and do it for recent projects, but not old projects. I mean, like those ones that did not make it, we could go through the addresses and through the cards and come up with the data. Yeah, we can.
I'm just curious whether, it's the residents on the affected street that are the most vociferous. They're the ones that are affected. They're the ones with the kids who are playing close to the traffic. And as you move away from the hot zone, if you like.
That's another good solution too, is to reduce the project area. Don't go to the side street. But sometimes you have like a cul-de-sac, and those people are affected like people who live on the street. So you have to include them, you know. So yeah, it could work both ways. From recent meetings, like I said, people want to expand the area, and we keep warning them, do not do it. I mean, we can if they want, if they agree on doing it, it could be expanded, but the chances of the project passing will be much less than without expanding, yeah. But that's a good point. We could adjust that too, the voting area, yeah.
Thank you. Is that all, Commissioner Urbanski? You're on mute.
Yes.
Okay,
How
thank you.
How do I remove my hand?
Just click it again.
Oh.
Thank you. Commissioner
Thank you.
Bobadilla?
Whatever changes we end up agreeing on and they move forward, fast forward, would any projects that have failed, would they go back and get reconsidered with the new regulations?
I wanna, you know, I think what we could do, let's say we came up with a new methodology, new process, or we set a new threshold for the percentage. We could revisit those projects. I mean, we have the plans already, you know, the plans already developed, but we could pull the plan again.
It just seems like because you already have the data, kind of like what you're already sharing with us, Jabra, that we're just redoing a calculation. But before even thinking down the road of opening up Pandora's boxes, how far back does one want to go for denied projects, right?
Yeah, well,
that's another question that needs to be important considered.
It's probably from the last 4 years. Okay. That's fair. Before that, I think they have to start the process again. It's been too long. And don't forget, sometimes there is a turnover in home ownership, and different people live on the street and they want different things.
I agree with you. They're completely there. Honestly, I even think 4 years might even be pushing it, just between you and I, because I think there's a lot that's happened in 4 years here at Beaverton. So yeah. I'm comfortable with that.
Depending on the commission pleasure, you know, we could do whatever you feel is fair and legit. We can do that. We could, or what we could do, we could ask, you know, have the opinion of the neighborhood. Do you wanna poll the plan again, or use the existing? I mean, the thing, we have to reevaluate, yeah, depending on the new process. And if, let's say, they make it, then we could send out a questionnaire. Would you like to, you know, to go ahead and construct the plan, or you would like to, you know, work on a different plan? I mean, we have to come up with some.
Yeah. It seems like there's a lot, and it's good. This is important for the community, but it seems like there's a lot of steps that need to be probably reconsidered, or maybe. And I'm just interested in the commission. How do we tackle some of this? Because some of this is some great things, but there's numerous steps, such as, are we going to want to narrow down the numbers? It seems like we want to do something. So what happens?
Right, and I see Commissioner McClean had a point. I think one thing that I'd like to do, though, is point out before Commissioner or Vice Chair McClean, is that was one of the reasons, and to Commissioner Urbanski's point, the discussions we've had over the years, people say we need to change it, we need to change it, we need to change it. The commission has had some discussions about what the best way is, but that's why at the last March meeting at the workshop, we specifically said, okay, this is a citywide issue. That's exactly what the BCCI is for. They're for communication. The NACs are not, the NACs don't represent the city or the community. They're a viaduct between them, right? Because you've got a channel for people to give feedback. So that's exactly why at the end of the workshop, we asked the BCCI to go back out, talk to the NACs, come back and make recommendations and discussions, and not just, it needs to change. Because we can come up with our own thing here. We've come up with a couple of things in the past, but That's exactly what we wanted to do. So with that, I'd like to have Commissioner or Vice Chair McClean make his comment or question, and then I'd like to hear so that we can at least see what the BCCI came back with and what their recommendations and suggestions and requests are, which were supposed to be specific and detailed. So I'd like to proceed with that first. So Commissioner or Vice Chair McClean.
Yeah, I was going to make that point also. I wanted to answer Commissioner Bobadilla. I think it's, as the commissioners, we can advise, we can update the plan, and we can put in the plan, if they don't meet the criteria, they don't meet the threshold, they have X number of years to reapply or do other things. So I think we can make the plan whatever we want. It's really going to come down to us. And like you asked, Commissioner Bobadilla, does anyone have suggestions? I do have some suggestions, but like Chair Conway said, I want to wait for, the BCCI and all the feedback before I shared those. But yeah, I did have some suggestions that I'd want to share at the end. So that was all I want to say.
Thank you.
Thanks. I appreciate the guidance and like, what do you do? What's the next step? This is new and it's in a very intense conversation, honestly.
Right. All right. With that, then, Ms. Werner, we'd like to have, I believe the one person we had scheduled was the BCCI was Konnette to take over from Miles. And after that, then I believe we had a couple of people that had indicated they want to speak. So we'll go in that order. So first, if you could have Ms. Konnette speak, we'll begin from there. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you. Let me bring up my PowerPoint. I'm going to apologize up front. I'm missing Miles tonight. He has the most current version of the PowerPoint, so I'll be working from a older version of what we had put together. And so my name's Konnette Ethridge. I live at 13555 Southwest 31st in Beaverton, and I'm the current chair of the BCCI Traffic Calming Work Group. I'm also a member of the board of the Highland Neck Neighborhood Association. When we were here last, you're correct. You tasked us with finding out some information about from all the different NACs. Their concerns regarding traffic and as well as the process. And to that end, we did visit all of the 9 active NAC meetings to gain their opinions, and to also provide, you also suggested we provide them with some background information about the process, which we did. And then also looked at some of the traffic data. So let me see if I can bring this up. Appears to be coming. So the work group, as Jabra said, and thank you for that good recap, Jabra. I won't do a recap at this point because we agree on the different steps that have happened to date. But we initially worked at the traffic calming. I'm sorry, I'm going to see if I can find an even newer version, because it has the things that that Ernie's asking for. So the work group, yeah, here it is. We'll go through to here. So the work group reconvened, as Jabra said, after being delayed by the pandemic. It was developed through the concerns of both the Highland and the Central Beaverton NACs. And we began to meet and look at some of the traffic data that was available to us. Jabra helped get us some of that information. One of the things we looked at was the traffic count information. This has been available since 2014. And here's an example of a snapshot of Highland neighborhood areas about what is happening to traffic in the neighborhoods. All neighborhoods are experiencing increases in traffic. And if you look at from 2014 to 2019, you'll see that some parts of neighborhoods are really having a much more severe impact than other parts of neighborhoods.
Sorry, Konnette, I can't see anything. Are you showing us a point? Is someone, can everybody else see it? I can't see nothing.
I don't see anything.
Okay,
Sorry,
hang
I
on.
can't see nothing.
I think I didn't hit my share button. This is why I cherish Miles. Keeps me honest. Oh, now you can see?
Yep,
Yes.
I can see it now.
Okay. So this is a snapshot of the Highland neighborhood. It illustrates that what most neighborhoods are experiencing, which is an increase in traffic in general. And every neighborhood has its hotspots. Would love to have coffee with Jabra and talk about why some of these are showing up, like the Wilson to Hart being an 87%. That may not be accurate, I don't know, but the point is that all our neighborhoods are having problems. Just kind of interest, if you look under 2020, you can see that we have a marked drop in traffic counts, probably related to the pandemic and people staying at home. Secondly, we looked at the previous traffic calming process data that started in 1999. And there were 23 projects that were completed during this time. Generally, they all passed without incident, with a lower number of non-returned ballots, and the appeal process was only resorted to one time. So then we looked on at specifically from 2018 to 2020, which is when the failed projects tended to occur. And there were 4 of the 5 projects that held neighborhoods that held projects. 4 of those failed. In this is kind of a synopsis of what we were talking about and what Jabra was explaining about what happens between the percentages of total votes based on the designated votes and percentage of return votes. And you can see there's quite a bit of a difference. And in looking at it, we feel that a lot of this difference is related to these not returned votes. By this time, these votes are 25 to 41%. That's an increase over the period of time when the original 23 projects was done. And as a visual graphic that helps illustrate that, this is a pie chart that kind of shows what happens if you lump the not returned votes in with the no votes. You pretty much overwhelm the yes votes in that case. So in looking at that, when we go out to the neighborhood associations with that piece of information, what we heard was that we should change the way that we tally those votes. This was kind of the themes of the feedback that we got. The first and foremost was to eliminate non-returned votes. Don't count them as part of the no vote tally. Second was set a minimum threshold. There's kind of a de facto minimum. If you have to have 67% of yeses, then that's your de facto minimum return. But there was a range of what was considered at the different NACs between 51 and 67%, as was suggested as minimums. For a set number of affirmative votes for passages, same thing, 51 to 67%. There was a range. what was of interest to us also was that we heard a lot of other comments beside just the comments about the voting process. And I think, Ernie, to your point, we might have hit some pay dirt with some of these. Basically, what we heard from all the different neighborhoods seemed to consolidate around about 5 themes. We heard more about the voting process. So we had some suggestions that we look at updating the voting materials and communications to promote better understanding of the different options. There was suggestions that we allow online and texting options to vote. There were suggestions to have the voting cards available in multiple languages. Suggestions that the neighborhood public hearing signs should be larger and easier to read and understand. And I witnessed that myself. You have to pull over, get out and read the sign in order to know what the sign is about. There was also an interesting suggestion about a lack of to work more on some kind of a community consensus before taking the votes. Some people felt that there were unresolved issues, particularly around speed bumps, that maybe could have contributed to people just not returning a vote. And then finally, there was a case where somebody was concerned about whether their neighbors knew their vote or not. They also seemed to be concerned about just multiple people showing up at their door, which I can understand if somebody's living alone and maybe answering your door isn't as safe as it used to be. The next thing that we saw in the comments was that there were lingering concerns after a project fails regarding the vulnerability of hotspots within the neighborhood, like schools and bus stops and transitional traffic areas, stop signs, and pedestrian crossings, either formal or informal. People crossing to get to their mail, for instance, on a blind hillcrest was an example. So there were thoughts about, can't we circle back to these hot spots and find some kind of a mitigation or solution for them? Some solutions, as Jabra has informed us, don't require a whole traffic calming process. There could be flashing signs or something, some kind of a treatment, standardized treatment around school areas and that sort of thing. There was a suggestion that we enlist the help of our police to identify and these hotspots and develop a monitoring plan. Currently, ever so often the neighborhood association will ask our police liaison to monitor certain areas. Maybe this could become a scheduled type of a thing. Another really good comment I thought was to address some of the visibility issues. I think Barlow in particular has a hill crest that it causes a lot of concern. The visibility isn't good there. Turns on blind turns are sometimes happening, and sometimes there's foliage that prevents a real good view of the oncoming traffic. We also heard that we could look at a little bit at our Traffic Commission website and improve its navigability. I think that's true of a lot of websites. Maybe install some links to applications and forms, provide an organized information about past projects, and maybe describe the process for submission of letters to the Traffic Commission. These were things that came up, and maybe you all have some others. We heard also about expanding the designs. What I think this conversation seemed to center around how unpopular speed bumps are. I agree with Jabra that came out loud and clear, that some votes failed because the solution was a speed bump, not because the people in that area did not want traffic calming. The impression is that anything beyond a speed bump in the traffic calming process requires additional funding, and things like traffic circles and swales and things like that that might help are expensive. That's the impression. And again, I think there could be things like how standardizing entrances to our neighborhoods so that people coming into any neighborhood know they're entering a neighborhood or something like that. A real good question, one I have for Jabra, is what else is new? What is happening in the traffic engineering world that we should explore? Are there different types of monitoring besides flashing signs? I know we had a box on Barlow that issued 43 citations. The box took the pictures and issued the citations, is my understanding. I don't. That's kind of. I think that many of us would prefer, that live in the neighborhood, would prefer some other type of mitigation beside a ticket. But what is? But it begs the question: what else is new that we could take advantage of? And then, yes, the main thing that we heard in the NACs, and 5 of the NACs did actually decide to take a vote to support a change in the voting tallying process. But what we heard was eliminate non-return votes from counting with the vote tally, or ballots, I guess I should say, set a minimum threshold, and set a number of affirmative votes that are required to pass. Finally, I was able to look at and try to collate some of the testimony letters. At the time I looked at them, there were about 20. 18 of them cited the voting process. 10 of them are concerned about school zones still being a problem and children being in danger. Speeding continues to be an issue, but also inattentive driving and rolling through stop signs and things like that. Traffic calming is still thought to be needed on these streets. There's also which is a disconcerting report of drivers being inconsiderate to neighbors that are trying to enter their driveway, or children that are crossing crosswalks. There was a woman I talked with that had her daughter was let off at the home because of special needs, and would routinely get honked at. So I'm not sure what maybe we need a city campaign or more education, Ernie, I think. Traffic calming is not needed, is the opinion of some. And that's kind of what the summary of our look at this problem was. I would like to thank you for your time and consideration. I hope this information is helpful. If I can answer any more questions, or you have other suggestions for how the BCCI work group could work, I'd be would be happy to hear.
Thank you. I
Anything?
appreciate the input and presentation, and again appreciate the time. I think that one of the things that and I'm sure that you know, and myself, is that
Ernie,
I'm
I have
sorry.
to say
Yes.
one more thing. There's a slide missing out of here. It had to, and this came out across 2 different NACs, but it had to do with this, your comment about this being a citywide issue, and that did come out. Basically, there's thoughts that there are things inside the neighborhood, but also things outside of the neighborhood that are causing some of these issues, that we need to have a bigger outreach process that, for instance, reaches the transportation planning process, that we that there was a sense that there was a a consolidation of purpose needed, maybe between different departments. So one city department might not address traffic calming issues in the neighborhoods at all. Another might, but in a different way than another one. So there was the thought that maybe there could be a consolidated goal related to neighborhood traffic. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate the feedback. Again, I think one of the things I was going to say was that as a NAC chair, I am totally aware of the ability to get and not get feedback from your community. I mean, it's hard to get people to attend meetings unless there's a hot button issue. I know that our meetings can go from the board to 50 plus, depending on what business is about to open or attempt to open or doing something like that. And that's been a historic thing. So it is difficult to get involvement. I appreciate the feedback and the work on that. So the commission thanks you for your time, especially the amount of work it took for the BCCI to go back out, as well as all the BCCI reps, each of the NAC representatives presenting at their meetings. One of the things I did have, I'll start with a question. One of the things I saw when I read through the notes was there seemed to be a giant lumping of things in, such as people running stop signs in a school zone. That does not seem to be something that a traffic calming is. That's not even something I think that. It seems like there's a bigger, deeper issue if people. I can't believe there are that many people that are letting someone else drive their children to school and are not aware of what's going on with their children in a car. Because certainly if you had children, whether they were in the car or not, you would be careful and cautious going through the school zone. So if you're speeding through the school zone, you can't possibly have kids. It would be unfathomable that a parent would drive and run a stop sign. Yet a large number of these were concerned about the people driving through. So I guess one of the questions from a solution standpoint was there a distinction made between what they felt was a traffic calming need, speed versus just kind of what was the motivation? Because I think that to Mr. Khasho's point was help understand how big does the scope need to be. And like Wilson, when you say Wilson or 130th, I have no idea what that means. And I take a step back as a regular person. What would that, how big is that?
What I can tell you is that it's a pretty big street. I think there were close to 100 designated residents in that street. I think Jabra, isn't that right? And there's an elementary school and a middle school on that street. At one end of it is Allen Boulevard and the other end is Hart. So it's a pass through as well. I think that there's opportunities there. I think that apparently this came out in more than one NAC as well, that people drive their kids to school and do rush to school in trying to get their kids to school on time. So there might be an opportunity to do some kind of an educational thing in conjunction with the schools as part of the start of every year or something like that, I think. I think there is pass through. I think that's why Wilson, I think when Hart got calmed, that was a good thing. Hart's a cut through to Denny and 217. And I think that's a good thing, but I do think it did push traffic, some of the traffic to where there isn't a lot of speed bumps and that sort of thing. When I look at the signing on Wilson for the school, I don't find it excessive. And maybe we could look at, Jabra could help us look at maybe just 1 or 2 speed bumps that are, and there could be some kind of a standard approach to schools in general that are having this problem. I'm not sure, but
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I was just curious if there was some of that information and some of just the themes that had gone. I appreciate you capturing those as well, because I think one of the things that we've seen as a commission, especially some of the things we discussed with like truck parking, people were parking their trucks over in 5 Oaks Triple Creek they didn't actually live there because there's no place to park a truck. So there definitely was city impact and people coming and going. And I think your point about cross functionality and citywide issues is well taken, especially things like South Beaverton is growing. The roads are not, Hart is busier because it's the only way to get out to the other side where all of the growth is, but they still need to get 217. So there's some good points. Did anybody else have any questions?
There's a,
Oh, I'm sorry, I saw a hand. Commissioner Urbanski, please.
Question for Konnette. So do you by any chance have any data on accidents before and after the installation of traffic calming devices, for example, on Hart? Because, for example, installing speed humps, I can see slowing traffic down, but if underlying problem is distracted driving, I suspect speed humps could make things worse. If somebody's texting or putting on makeup and they hit a speed bump, they're either gonna lose control of their car or suddenly slow down and get rear-ended. And if it's raining or if it's in the winter time, so putting speed humps, while it may slow down the traffic, could be creating another problem that we haven't talked about. So I just wondered if you had any accident data before and after.
not about Hart. There was a sign put in that limited left turns off of 130th onto Allen because of accidents that occurred there, because that's a Blind Hill example. And I don't know the numbers. What I believe we were told was that it had decreased accidents. We had, interestingly, on the entrance to Hart, there's a circle, a traffic circle, and every winter it was the site. I've lived there for 20 years. Every winter it's the site of accidents when things get icy and snowy. I was walking by there and happened to notice that there is a perpetual water running across that. There's a spring about 6 feet away from that intersection. So we were able to call, the NAC was able to contact, and I don't know, Jabra, if you did this for us or not, but was able to contact the city, and they diverted the water to a collector, and so it doesn't cross those streets anymore, and we have had a marked decrease in accidents at that site. So I think this hotspot issue is an important one that you might have to look closely to see where the low-hanging fruit is, where you can correct problems.
Thank you. Commissioner Urbanski, is that?
Yeah, I still would like to see some concrete evidence to suggest that these calming devices are really working in the global thing. I mean, are they causing fewer accidents, which ultimately is what the goal is, or are we creating newer types of accidents? And I don't know whether maybe Jabra has some data along those lines.
Right, Mr. Khasho?
Yeah, speed humps, actually, they do not increase crashes. You don't see crashes on speed humps. The reason why it slows down traffic, it does. It's one of the best devices that will take care of speeding and cut through traffic. You could put all the devices in the world on the street. If you don't have speed humps, cut through traffic will not go away. Yeah, you might reduce the speed a little bit, but you will not reduce cut through traffic. Yeah, speed humps does not increase crashes at all. We call
Does it decrease the severity of a crash because the speeds are lower?
Potentially it could, yeah, it could. And when we do the ranking, we look at the crash data to see if you'll gain more points. And most of our streets that they're posted 25 miles per hour, you don't see any crashes on them, before or after. Typically crashes occurs on high volume arterials or collector streets. And again, Wilson Avenue and 130th, Wilson Avenue is a collector street. So it is designed and it is laid out to carry, large amount of traffic. The The bad thing is it has 2 schools on it. But
Wilson has 2 schools on it.
yeah, Wilson has 2 schools, yeah, Fairgrove and Highland. The thing also, it's posted 20 miles per hour between 7 a.m. and 5 p.m. So that's the posted speed on it during school days. And still people are speeding. Now it was mentioned parents don't speed, or they do or not. Typically speeders are people who live in the neighborhood. I mean, who use those streets. It's people who live around it. And I've seen parents within school zones speeding, even they get ticketed sometimes. And violation of stop signs, it happens all over, especially when people are in a hurry. You know, they start rolling through it or don't pay attention and they go through it. It happens within school zone. And you see sometimes parents, I mean, I go sometimes in the morning or, you know, during arrival and release time and just watch when I get complaints. And you see parents, yeah, drop their kids and they just go through, you know, at a high speed, run stop signs. They're in a hurry. They're not thinking. That's what happens. So it happens. And for stop signs, it doesn't matter how much traffic calming devices you have on the street. When people run the stop signs, they run them. The only key to change this habit is enforcement, is number 1. Education will help. Education helps too, but with some people, it's just temporary. When you hit people in the pocket for violating a traffic law, it works. Although some people disagree with me, but I've been in the business for over 30 years and I've seen it all. And I'm a believer, enforcement would solve issues, you know, people violating stop signs, speeding too. But you can't have a police officer on the street 24/7, you know. That's why you need those traffic calming devices.
Thank you. Stephanie, or sorry, Ms. Warner, we had 2 people who had requested to speak. Is that correct?
That is correct. And I will unmute Adam.
Okay, and while this is not a public hearing, we would ask that you follow the same decorum, state your name, address, and if there's anything new you'd like to add, please add that. If you'd like to state just for the record that you agree with everything that's been said, no need to recap everything we've already gone through. But if you have something new, please let us know. Thank you.
Okay, my name is Adam Gretzinger. I live on Southwest 140th Avenue. I'm also the chair of the Highland NAC, elected by the people in the neighborhood who showed up. I wanted to let you know that a lot of that feedback that you got from Highland was a result of the canvassing activity that several of my board members completed. And we particularly canvassed the areas that had the failed projects and got the people who had some sort of feedback about it. I also wanted to add something about the funding. There was that mention about funding from the city councilors, from Councilor Sansusi, but there was also a mention by me, and also the appearance of the design of the existing traffic calming program appears to pinch the number of projects that can happen by the consent thresholds. And that is perhaps where this funding pinch is coming from. And I understand now that from hearing from council, they're willing to fund these if we had them. But as is, the thresholds are so high. I also wanted to point out in particular, Jabra's concern, and I share it, about wanting to remove traffic calming measures. And I think we could raise the threshold, including making it a financial, having the people who want it removed have to pay some portion of the financial costs to remove the measures. May be a adequate deterrent to get people to vote yes or no. And then just earlier in the meeting, you were talking about basically the concept of quorum requirements for your meeting, but you also should consider a quorum requirement for the survey votes. And that way, that double majority concept, as I mentioned the last time I testified in March, you would get presumably an adequate amount of consent. And I also want to point out reasons for not participating. There is a major religion that requires people not to vote. People based on their ages, Beaverton has an older population, may not be voting because they don't understand or want to. And as well as scheduling and junk mail overload that citizens may have. So I don't excuse the people for not voting, but there are many reasons that people just throw away a letter from the city. And that's all I have, and I appreciate the opportunity to testify. And I have specific, the resolutions that Highland passed in my written testimony, as well as some specific suggestions, including some minor errors and some kind of understanding the process suggestions that you could look at. Thank you.
Ernie, you're on mute.
Thank you. Thank you, Adam. I wanted to say I appreciate the time, and also note that you were only one of 2 people that I saw really who had provided some in-depth information and suggestions and recommendations. So I appreciate the time and effort, especially bringing them back. I know that as an ACT chair, that was helpful and appreciated. So thank you very much. Any questions for Adam? Thank you. Appreciate that. I believe that we had one other person, Ms. Warner, who wanted to speak.
We do. This is Annie.
Thank you.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I'm Annie. I also live in the Highland neighborhood. I live on Southwest Whisper Court, which is a cul-de-sac right off of the corner of 130th and 22nd. And I have also submitted written testimony and don't want to have to kind of review all of that. But I do have some really strong feelings about this. And I think I want to emphasize first, my husband and I have only lived here for 3 years. So we've lived in other major cities. I've done other traffic calming. I didn't own a car for several years. And I care a lot about Beaverton. It's a really great city in a lot of ways, but I've been really disappointed with the slowness on all of this traffic calming. And so there were comments made during this meeting that residents who are writing in were just venting or complaining or didn't understand things. And I think that's really sad. People took time out of their busy schedules. They have kids, they have work. With everything going on in COVID, they wrote to you. And I think that if there's misunderstanding from residents, it's your job then to educate the residents. And I know that sounds harsh, but I think that it kind of needs to be said. I have learned so much from Konnette and from Adam about this process. And it's been a lot of work put by volunteers. And I know many of you are volunteers, but that's like, people have jobs and are trying to do all of this. And I was part of the canvassing as well. And I talked to residents who have small children, and they're like, I'm glad that you're going out and canvassing and asking people about this, because I'm really concerned, but I don't have time to sit through a 2-hour meeting on a night or follow all of this or ask all of the questions. I had other residents that we followed up with 2 separate canvassing events, and they said, oh, well, I already got it. I know everything. And then by just sitting instead of already having an idea, after 20 minutes, I heard people's thoughts. So I think that one thing I would encourage, which is it's not an active suggestion, but it is something that I've noticed during this meeting, and I've noticed through other traffic commission things, is you guys already have your opinions about this. It's been really clear, and you seem to think that you know best. Whether or not that's the case or not, that's how it's coming across. And residents aren't going to want to try to have to argue with their lived experiences with you. And I think it's much better to ask questions and listen and get feedback. And I don't know, maybe this has been the case, but I spent hours canvassing. I spent hours talking to residents in my neighborhood, and I heard a lot of, I don't understand the program. I was told that it's best to just do speed bumps and that's the cheapest, and I don't want that. So whether or not you explain all the options, the message that's perceived by residents is that you only want to do speed bumps. So I think that you need to, I would encourage you to maybe take some of this to heart, that how you're messaging this program and how you like the program to be received isn't how it's being received by residents. And I think that there's a lot of blaming to residents that, oh, well, we never had this problem before about getting ballots returned. And I think that it's an issue now. And so it doesn't matter whether or not it was an issue previously. And it's the job of the city to engage with residents and understand that there are, like Adam said, there are various reasons that people aren't returning things. And I think the other piece that's not shown by any of this data is people's lived experiences day to day. Like I said, and I think I really appreciate Konnette bringing this up on the hotspots. I live off of 130th and 22nd, which is right next to a park. And you talk about accidents and not having accidents, that doesn't represent the number of near accidents. At least once a week, I hear honking and I hear screeched cars. And I've only lived here less than 3 years. I've already witnessed one accident. And I witnessed kids playing, running into the street, playing soccer, having their bike there. All it takes is one of those accidents to hit a kid and be fatal. And so I think this, we'll figure it out, or this is fine, doesn't capture the fear that residents who are calling and complaining and saying this is really important to us. This is, like, I'm not even exaggerating, a matter of life and death for people. And the fact that Highland has been so vocal is because the 3 projects have been next to schools and next to parks. And I think that the other piece, not to discount it all, is the anonymous voting. Every resident I talk to, whether or not it gets passed up to the city, there is concern. I talked to one resident, and I want to kind of hide details to maintain privacy, but was told that if they started a project, that their neighbors would turn on them. And they were specifically warned by other neighbors in the neighborhood not to start a traffic calming project. And so I think that's also, as you're talking about the scope of things, it's really important to think about the burden that you're putting on residents to improve their neighborhood. I talked to another resident who had tried one of the projects and basically said, I'm done with the city government. I don't trust them at all because it was so much work. It was so stressful and nothing changed and everything got worse. So I think that there's a lot that isn't shown by the data, that when you talk to people and you engage with them and you ask them honest questions instead of coming from a point of, I already know this, or I have this many years of experience, and you ask how people are living right now, that gets talked about and gets shown. And I think as you talk about wanting to relook at the project, I think that engaging with the NACs and really doing this canvassing work is really important. This ground level, person to person work is really important, because without all of the work that has gone in with all of this canvassing, a lot of these stories wouldn't have gotten shared. I learned a lot about the traffic. I learned a lot about the history of my neighborhood. And from hearing all of these stories, I'm only more concerned, and I'm terrified of 130th. People go 45 miles an hour and it's next to a park. Someone is going to get killed.
Thank you. Yeah, we've had discussions, and we've seen, I think the question about near misses is something that people have brought up in other cases where they wanted, the traffic calming is a little different. But stop signs have come up before, adding stop signs, removing stop signs. traffic direction. Those have come up, and a lot of the cases that have been described are accidents. But then the thing that has come up that's been hard to quantify for people is exactly what you said, near misses. So appreciate you reminding everybody about that. One thing I will note though, the commission doesn't decide on whether a speed bump or what the solution is for the neighborhood. That's between the neighborhood and the city and the city staff. So the commission does not say you have to put a speed bump. We wait for the project to come back as a coordination and collaboration between the city and the community.
Yeah,
So
what
I
I'm
just
saying
want to
is,
make that one distinction.
yeah,
on
no,
that.
and I think you've made that point
So-
really clear. I guess my point is that's not how it's being perceived by the residents.
Right, and I think that's one of the things that we had hoped that the BCCI and the NAC, because we're seeing that as well too, Annie. And I'll say just a quick side note on that, that the NACs have faced the same thing in that some NACs have a lot of community involvement and some of them do not, and it depends on a lot where the hot buttons are, because we have as a commission seen cases where no one has shown up for something, or even the person who submitted the request hasn't shown up. They're not sure. We're struggling with how to get that community involvement. I think some of the numbers show that. So I appreciate the input and the time, and definitely the passion in your voice for that. And all things very valid. So, Mr. Khasho.
Yes, I just want to mention what was called hotspots. I mean, we get complaints. An email will work from any person. Once it is stop sign, there is a problem, they'll just send an email. They could do it online. That's how we deal with these things. Traffic calming is just, it deals with speeding and cut through traffic. There's a misperception here that they think traffic calming comes in and it's going to solve everything they could think of. One thing was mentioned, on 130th and the cost. When we met with the neighborhood, all options were on the table, but people who attend the meetings, they pick and choose what they want. If you don't attend the meeting to pick and choose what you want, how would we know that person wants this device, not that device? It just, you bring as many people as you can to the meeting. Hopefully everybody can participate. If you can't participate, you could check with your neighbor. If you have a good neighbor, tell them we like these things. But to blame staff on saying it's only speed humps, that's not true. On 130th, they wanted a traffic circle on 22nd. Before you say, yeah, traffic circle will fit, you should think first about safety and how emergency vehicles are going to go through, how fire trucks are going to make it through the traffic circle. Does the traffic, if a traffic circle fits within the existing right-of-way and a fire truck can navigate it, a garbage truck can go through it, that option is viable. But when you require to buy right-of-way and start cutting people yards, the program does not go that far. We try to work with the existing right-of-way we have. We don't purchase right-of-way because and then funding become an issue. Right-of-way is very expensive. Instead of the project costing, 60, 70 or 100 grand, then you'll add another 100 just for right-of-way, and you haven't accomplished anything. You took money from other projects. So yeah, fiscal responsibility and financial responsibility is important, and the cost is important. We try to fit anything we can within the right-of-way we have. And if Highland Neck see any hotspots or any problems, just let us know and we'll take care of it. And some solutions requires a hearing by the traffic commission, and commissioners know this. So it seems there is some miscommunication or misperception that staff is just either ignoring problems or just say, hey, this is the only thing you could have. No, we had different options for 130th, and people who attended the meetings, that's what they chose, the plan that they chose. We don't impose anything on any neighborhood for traffic calming. We try to solve the problem that they have. And I agree. I always explain and mention that a variety of devices, it looks better and it will work too. Sometimes people like these things. Like I said, taking parking away. When you say, okay, you could have these things, but I'm gonna take parking away in front of your home. They tell you, no, I don't want this device. So which way do you go? You try to do your best. You try to work with the people who attend the meetings, and even after we come up with a meeting, we hold an open house to show the meeting that people liked. And if people who attend, if they come and attend the open house and they say, okay, we don't like the plan, or I want to change something, we'll go back to the drawing board. And we did this many times. So it seems there is just a misperception or miscommunication what we can do and what we offer, or in areas where we have, multilingual residents, we try to translate the card and the letters, and we've done it in the past. We did Vietnamese, we did Spanish, we did Russian. We always do these things. But sometimes we also need to know if they tell us, typically those things happen where you have multi-family units. And we always are aware of these things, and we try to provide the best communication available. And I'll just, that's all I have to say about it.
Thank you, Mr. Khasho. I appreciate that, and appreciate the explanation and time, because it is definitely a balance that I think this commission has seen, and staff is definitely has a lot of work for the staffing that they have, and the recent events have been difficult to get all that done. So I'm thankful for what we've accomplished, at least thus far. I would like to hear from Sergeant Shaw first, and then I believe that Ms. Annie had a comment as well. So I'll go back. Sergeant Shaw, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to just maybe touch base with Annie and just let her know that, so I'm the sergeant of our traffic unit here at Beaverton Police Department. And we are also concerned with near misses, with traffic speeding in neighborhoods and stop sign running. I think we're talking about kind of a higher global issue in just people driving badly. Unfortunately, there's not enough of us. I could have a unit twice my size and we still would not make everything that we wanted to do within our city. We try our best to hit the spots that our citizens are very concerned about. So communicating with Mr. Khasho's office or my office with those hot spots helps me. I have a specific officer that tallies all of the concerns from our citizens so that we can go out there and specifically hit those areas. And unfortunately, they're cyclical. So we go and hit one area, and then we hit it for a couple of months, and then we have to go and we move to another area. And then that area is calmed down for a little while, and then it comes back. So changing driving behavior is really between Mr. Khasho's office, my office, and an education campaign. I don't know what more we can do. I am always open for suggestions on what more we can do with the resources that we have. But we hear your concerns. I hear your concerns, and please don't hesitate to communicate with us, and we'll be as responsive as possibly can. But that, unfortunately, on our end, for those people that are cutting through or in the neighborhoods that are doing those things, oftentimes they are the residents, and they are going to get the sting of a $265 ticket for running a stop sign, or it could be higher than that if they're speeding in a school zone. So hopefully that changes their behavior, but that's most of what the work we do is we issue those citations in those to those people that are doing dangerous things within to our vulnerable population. That's all I had. If anybody has any questions.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. I want to go to Vice Chair McClean, and before we go to answer, that everyone has a chance to kind of follow up on all the thoughts here.
Thank you. I don't have any questions for Sergeant Shaw. Thank you. But I just wanted to bring up some good points. I think, we do welcome feedback, and we encourage feedback in any traffic commission meeting. And I think it's a challenge on us and the traffic commission specifically of what we can and can't do. Obviously, there's the city council and there's other, factors, but it's a challenge setting expectations. I think the traffic calming program itself was designed for specific, people speeding or cutting through or safety. And that's why there is the whole calming process of that 85th percentile. How often is happening? Is it happening for multiple days? If it's a long street, then that's a more prone to speeding. If it's a short street that has curves or has islands or there's stop signs and people aren't, stopping at a stop sign, traffic calming does not resolve that. So I think there's a clear challenge of what traffic calming can and cannot do. And I think it's complex because the specific examples of it's a speed hump, or it's the speed humps that have the little grooves so fire trucks can go through. Not everybody likes that. Some people do. If it's a flashing, your speed sign, and people don't, they're like, oh, I want to see how high I can get it up to. That's something traffic calming isn't going to resolve. It's going to alert people. Most people will slow down because they'll see the red flashing your speed sign, but not everybody does. So I think there is a challenge of traffic. What can traffic calming actually resolve? What's enforcement? What's other things? And so I think with the traffic commission, historically we've had is that neighborhood involvement has always been successful. That if it's the local NAC, if it's canvassing, if it's the person that's submitting the request for traffic calming, getting their neighbors involved and getting a consensus and getting everyone to agree on the plan, those have more success versus us going out and trying to convince people. Really the local community is going to have the more success than us. And I think, going back to the traffic calming program, I had some suggestions before this meeting, but the language one I think is a really good idea. Whatever we can do to increase the number of languages that form is available to, maybe some things are canned, others are unique to obviously that street or that plan, but anything we can do with the languages is a great idea. I also thought of the idea of maybe having a neighborhood statement. A lot of people don't open the mail, or they don't read it, or they read it and they don't care. If there is maybe an option, just a brainstorm idea, is whoever the person submitting the request, or if the NAC can agree on a paragraph statement saying, this is why we want this is going to help the neighborhood, please vote yes. It's almost like a campaign, which again, I don't want to get into voting rules, but having some type of statement included in that letter might be an easy way to do that. I think also that the BCCI involvement, the community involvement, getting that more discussions will have a more success, because in the pandemic, of course, I think dramatically affected that participation in 2020. I don't think when the calming plan was written, it had an idea that a pandemic was going to happen in 2020. So it's hard to foresee everything, but definitely I think that affected how much people responded and what people's priorities were. And those even had higher than in 2018 and 2019. So I think that definitely, so that's something that we can look at. We can look at if we adjust the traffic calming plan to say, hey, if participation does not reach a certain criteria, let's say less than 50% people respond, then we can table it for up to 3 or 5 years. We can decide as the commissioners how we want to modify that plan. We don't have to say this is a no and they're out of luck. We could say, let's revisit this if it's a higher priority. I think also there's no's. And when, as a commissioner, when I hear half the people want something, half people don't want something, how am I deciding which half the people I want to listen to? That's always a really challenge as a commissioner. So if 100 people said yes and 0 said no, it's easy. But even if it's a small percentage of people say no, if it's 25% of people say no, and 25% say yes, then that's a really challenge, because 50% don't say anything. And do I want to just ignore those 50%? Do I want to just only listen to 25%, even though the 100% of the neighbors are going to be affected by what we install? So it's a challenge for me personally to be like, where should I decide? And some of those ones that did fail had, 17 or 21 no votes. So it wasn't just a minority of people that said no. Even when there was one, I think it was like 3 or 4 years ago, there was like 3 or 4 no's, and because it was just specific to his house. His house had, it was taking away parking, it was doing something. Everyone else on the rest of the street was like, oh, it doesn't affect me, I don't have a problem with it. So there is a challenge as a commission to say, hey, do we want to kind of say this one person's out of luck for the greater good? That's a hard decision to make. So I think having this traffic calming program really kind of allows for that process. Everyone gets their input. Everyone has the opportunity to, give their opinion, but ultimately it comes down to us and the commission to say, hey, where do we think the biggest need is? And, there are some that are kind of borderline. It's not the design of the street that's the problem. It's people's behavior. So is traffic calming actually going to change people's behavior? To a limit, it might with the calming project, like with the calming device types, whether it's an island or roundabout or speed humps, it might. But if people aren't following certain enforcement, like the speed zone for schools, then they may not be successful. And if the calming types themselves aren't popular, then I ask myself, is it really a high priority for the neighborhood that there's a speeding problem? Because if I'm a resident and I'm like, there's a speeding problem, but it's not bad enough for me to say I want a speed hump on my street, then I'm like, no, wait a minute, what's going on? Isn't there a speeding problem, I thought? But I think that's the challenge. So having that community involvement, having that neighborhood, having that canvassing, getting that more feedback has been successful in the past. So I don't know what specifically happened with these other ones, but I think the ones I've been and participated in, even myself, I've been to some of those local meetings at the schools that decide on a plan. The ones that had a more conversation, more discussion have been more successful. So I think that's a low-hanging fruit. We're getting more people involved, lengthening. It's kind of a balance. It's like, why does it take so long for something to happen? But we want to get everyone's feedback and everyone's input. So it's like, what do we want to do? Do we want to make it fast, or do we want to include everybody? So I think these are the challenges we're faced as a commission. But I think we got a lot of good feedback today, so we can, going forward, we could all decide, okay, what are the ones that we want to start, looking at to modify the current TCP? That's all I'd say.
Thank you. We've kind of put Annie off. She did speak. Ms. Warner, I will allow her to speak quickly in a follow-up, and then I'd like to move on and kind of go to the other comments. I think what we have seen though tonight is that there's a lot of information to process, but there's also even hearing the hot spots and the points and looking at the letters and the information, there's definitely some coordinated efforts. There's also several points that are directly related to the traffic calming program, but there are also some that are definitely outside of the sphere of this particular conversation, right? Basically, the traffic calming program has some pretty clear guidelines, right? Well, they have very clear guidelines right now, and the discussion was, all right, perhaps we can change those benchmarks. But what we're also hearing underneath that is, as Commissioner McClean said, there are people who may not be voting because they don't want to vote, and there may be some that don't want anybody to know, right? We've already had the discussion that this is public records. There are people who have sent emails saying they don't want their name known. So there are a lot of conversations as well, I think, exactly as Commissioner McClean said, so I won't re-go over that, but I think that it bears warning. So with that, I'd like to hear a quick feedback from Annie, and then Commissioner Bobadilla had a comment as well. So Annie, if you could just give a quick follow-up of your comment.
Yeah. Well, I think that brings up a very good point that I forgot to mention in my first comment, is that when you guys were confused about when the city council said they wanted more resources, I think that this could be a thing that you could bring to city council and say, because I think as a resident, I'm a little confused because in my brain, traffic calming equals all of this. It equals putting things that will prevent running stop signs and redesigning streets. I think about walkability and whether it's safe for me to cross a street with my dog or not. That when I hear traffic calming, that is how it has been portrayed to me in other cities. So I think that when you talk about education, giving residents an understanding of when you have specific traffic calming only deals with speeding. And this is how, when you have other concerns about traffic, this is how you can get involved, because a lot of residents feel like they come to these meetings and then don't talk about these things. Don't have any, they don't see any effect. And so then they're like, why am I doing this? So some education of the different routes that people can go. And the second kind of short piece I just want to say is, I think Java's not understanding what I'm saying. I understand that the staff, has these limitations, but what I'm saying is, from talking to residents for hours and doing the canvassing, that's not what's being understood. So there is a very clear lack of communication, that it's not just a slight misunderstanding. When I hear from multiple residents that the only option that they understood was speed bumps, that means that there was a failure of education. Because if you're talking to several residents on 130th and the staff is telling me you had lots of options, and I go down the street and I talk to all my neighbors and they say my only understanding was that there were speed bumps, that's doesn't line up. And then I guess the final point I would make is, and I think this is really important, and it goes to the voting piece. And I think that this becomes this bigger question of traffic commission and traffic calming, is that you guys have been talking about it only impacts people on the street. It impacts everyone in the neighborhood. I have to cross 130th for my job daily. I take my dog on a walk. Every single time I cross that street, I'm afraid I'm going to get hit. Like even today, 3 times I walk my dog in the morning. I stopped for 2 minutes because I saw people going down 35 miles an hour. And I said, they're not going to see me. When I had to leave for work, I had to stop because people were speeding. And it is terrifying. I don't get to vote whether or not 130th gets traffic calming, but it impacts me. I have neighbors who have young kids who try to go to the park. They won't go to the park because they're scared. So like, I think you guys need to, whether this is traffic calming or whether this is going to the city and saying we need more resources to look at this as a neighborhood issue. I know this is, I just think that you guys, as you look at pieces, figure that piece out and go back to residents. I would encourage you to write to the residents that took the time to write and say, this is what traffic calming is. This is what it's not. This is how you can get involved if you have other concerns, because I think people it's really important. I'll leave it there.
And I think that's an excellent point, because that's exactly what the NAC program is for, and that's exactly what the BCCI is for. We've had these conversations, and I'm not trying to put it off on that, but I think it's very important to make sure that we explain that that's exactly, the NAC is not a voice of, the NAC doesn't tell the city, hey, this is what we decided. They do, this is what the communication is. This is what the people are saying. And the city comes back and says, here we go. We have a liaison that goes back and forth between them. We have a city liaison that talks to them. People bring up questions. Every public meeting has a public agenda for somebody to say whatever's on their mind that is not on the agenda as part of the public hearing. And every NAC has an opportunity for someone to say, hey, I've got this question, and there's somebody there from the city. And so one of the things that I hear you saying that's been kind of a theme, and I think Konnette brought part of that up as well, is we need to make sure that you understand we're not trying to diversify that, but the purview and the rules and the bylaws of what we do is only part of it. The Traffic Commission makes recommendations to the City Council that are typically approved as a consent agenda item, but we don't get to just say, this is what's going on. We can't change this and that. I think that a lot of people who joined the Traffic Commission who have not stayed on for a significant amount of time have been frustrated because they thought that somehow we were going to go out and say 217 needs to be changed. We're going to make BHH this way. Those are things we cannot do. We do not have that power. We have to wait and go. And so I think the biggest struggle that you're finding, and I'm not making an excuse for it, but I think it's very important. The Traffic Commission, within what the traffic calming is one thing. Walkability, that is the expanse that the Vision Committee had, right? The Vision Committee had put out their deal. They're doing their second one. They asked what was the most important thing. Number one thing the Vision Committee heard was walkability and livability and pedestrian walkways in the city. That was the number one thing that everybody in the city is aware of. But we just can't go put in a sidewalk wherever because half the streets are on one part and half are on the other. So I don't want to digress because we're getting a little off of where we're going. The first step, though, I think from this shows us that there's a lot of communication that needs to happen, and we also need to design what's going on. I hear there's already some hot points that bring the fact that we really need to kind of walk through what's the entire process and redefine it and how we're going to do that. And I think the same as we've seen before, we're not going to be able to take everything in one fell swoop. I think that there are definitely going to be some chapters and things and the beginning of this to go. I believe that we need to go back. The first person, though, was Commissioner Bobadilla, and then Ms. Konnette had, or Ms. Ethridge had a comment, and then Vice Chair McClean, did your hand go up or down? Okay, very good. So let's start with that. Commissioner Bobadilla.
First, I just wanted to be fair to Annie is that governing is very complex. But let's just be fair also to the public that earlier Jabra made a comment that all these things are public record. It's easier said than done for the general public just to be able to say, hey, I want this, where do I go that? It is much more complex of how to even get a document and where to go. And even in our, right now in Beaverton, there are numerous departments. I think we try, and especially I've seen this at the Traffic Commission. Commissioner Conway does a very good job that when we're in person, if it's not something that we can do, he will at least there say, hey, this is something you need to go here, or this is something you should go talk to so-and-so, which is important and is at least giving people direction and helping them. But I just want to make sure that the public knows that it is complex. And this department, this commission here, it doesn't solve every problem. We only have the opportunity to fix very limited things and it's even fix, it's give recommendations. And then it goes to the higher ups and see whether they accept our recommendations. But we try very hard to give you at least guidance of go here, go there, which I know stinks because most of us just want to be able to go to one place. It's just traffic. You should be able to deal with everything in general, which includes walkability. So, and I also want to make sure that I empathize with you. It is not fair that something that should be so simple can become so complex, even when you're wanting to request a record. Most people don't know that part, that what it takes and that what its public record means. The average person doesn't. I wanted to talk a little bit just real quick about some suggestions maybe is education campaign. It was mentioned earlier by Sergeant Shaw that basically education needs to be put out more. Some of the easy things that we can do, especially coming this fall when the schools come back and everybody gets back to the hustle and bustle. It's true, traffic behavior has changed. At first, I thought we were going to be more patient. And it seems like people have lost their patience now to get from one point. It's actually, in my opinion, worse than it was before COVID. And that's really concerning because we haven't hit the cusp yet of what it's going to be like when everybody is back to, it's not normal, our new way of living, because we're not going back, we're going forward. So I think in a good way is like we need to get out a campaign of education that could be put on our newsletters. I don't know if the police department ever sends out a newsletter or something, but that's done by email. That is done even by the city newsletter that comes out by the mayor every quarterly. As a quick reminder of the traffic pattern of what's happening, and like, hey, school's starting, we're moving beyond, we need to remember to be safe. It's kind of like everybody's got to school. I really think that's gonna be important because it's gonna be a nightmare then of how people are traveling right now. And patience is terribly low. The other one, how do we get people to more participate is the voting. I don't know if this could even be possible. Some sort of online voting, Jabra, that they get their postcard, but they also have a code so they can do their online voting instead of necessarily putting a postcard back. I can tell you, I've been a culprit of that. Sometimes you get something in the mail and say you can vote. And it sounds terrible, but people aren't as used to mail as it was. Like, fill it out and put it back. Look how hard it is to get people to return their ballots for regular voting, for a bond and everything. Even though we now have free postage, people are still scrambling at the last minute and things like that. People have to go out there and do campaigns to pick up their votes, so their envelopes. So maybe that could be a suggestion where they get their postcard, but there's a code so it can make sure it's that person voting and they can go online and vote. Sometimes people like that. I mean, just maybe options, and at least we tried to give the options there for the people to have access. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Ms. Ethridge, and I believe, please.
Uh,
Oh, you're on mute still, Ms. Ethridge.
I hit the line, but it didn't. Thank you all for those comments. I think they're very helpful to me. I've been trying to think about what my next steps should be with the BCCI work group. And it sounds like circling back to the NACs might be one of those things that we should do to say that that this information has been presented and that we're looking into the voting process and that there were additional recommendations that were discussed. I am wondering about engaging the the VAC committee. I talked with them. Actually, I had agenda time with them last night. Part of their part of what they're tasked to do is to develop a survey and from that and survey the community, and from that submit a report to the council. If that's agreeable strategy, I think I can work to help give them some more of the information that we got from the NACs when we made our rounds. And then I'm interested in the school campaign. I'd like for us to take at least one or two of those ideas that we heard tonight on the from the neighborhoods and see if we could come up with an operationalized plan. That's where I am at.
Thank you. We had one person in the gallery who had submitted an email, and we'll allow one quick comment if there was anything new to that. But I'd like to close it up. This is a workshop, so we do need to kind of consider what the next step is. But since there was an email submission, Ms. Warner will allow the quick comment there if we could.
Okay, I unmuted Kate.
Okay, thank you. My name is Kate Prakash. I live at 142nd and Barlow, and I was the one who initiated the traffic calming on Barlow Road. And to repeat after Annie, I am a parent of 2 children, and I've been sitting here for 2.5 hours listening in while reading them bedtime stories and doing all that other stuff. But traffic calming was important to me. I wanted to, as I listened tonight, the only thing I didn't hear and that I wanted to add was that for me, it felt like a very individual pursuit. I didn't feel any camaraderie or support while doing this. It felt like everything was on me. I was giving all the paperwork, the canvassing, and the deadline. And if you get this amount of petitions and signatures and you get it back, it will follow through. So a lot of my neighbors had been here for 50 years. They were so thankful that I was actually putting like boots on the ground and doing the work because they couldn't do it and they agreed it needed to be done. I happen to have the energy for it, which I really don't. And I have 2 young children. They came with me door to door, and it was very hard. But the one memory I have of this, and it was just last year I did this, it was exhausting. And I was on my own. I was by myself. There was nobody else. And I felt like I was the only one really trying to even remind people of the meetings and getting people to vote and doing all this stuff. I feel like there should be some sort of liaison or somebody to help out with that effort. It's such an individual effort on such a huge task of trying to keep the neighborhood safe. And I just feel like there should be more communication between the person who submitted the request and is doing the legwork and the city and the commission, in some sort of support there, or maybe working through the NAC as a group and having these requests come through that. So it seems more of a group or community effort and not just an individual effort. So that's all I wanted to point out, is that's where a lot of the frustration is coming from, because people do put in all the blood, sweat, and tears, and nothing comes, nothing comes forward from that. So
Exactly.
that's where the frustration comes from. So maybe we could talk about getting a liaison that can follow up with the person that's actually the one that submitted the request and is doing the work, saying, how's it going? Try this. Maybe someone can come and do door to door. Maybe we can do something else, or just that extra support for that person or the neighborhood that's going through the process in the early stages. And then in between those stages, when we have the meetings and getting the people and just getting more people to show up, it's just a lot of work for one person. That's how, that's my feedback.
Thank you, Kate, and I appreciate that. I appreciate that comment. And I think you reiterate for Adam and for anybody who's ever been a NAC chair and has gone through that. And I've been doing this for 20 years. And I can tell you that you feel a little left out, but this is exactly what the NAC program is for. This is exactly what the BCCI is for. They're conduits to the city. They have a city liaison there. Every meeting, the city liaison attends with the NAC board. And I think that's an excellent point, that if it shouldn't feel like you're going alone. And again, part of what we need to do is educate people on how the traffic calming process works and what the purview is of this commission, because again, we don't see it until the very end. We see it after the community has said, this is what we'd like to do. And the staff tries to work with it. As Mr. Khasho said, that's a juggling act as well. And I think anybody who's attended the NAC meetings knows that a lot of people are going to say, yeah, I'll check that box, but then they do something else. So with that in mind, I appreciate the comment. Vice Chair McClean.
Yes, I just want to add one comment. I think that's a really good feedback. And I think, going forward, we can either just have a discussion or we can look at it actually adding some specific language into the traffic calming program. But it's a great example of, I know other neighborhoods that had maybe a single requester and then it spreads to multiple neighbors, but having, in addition to the staff, because there's a lot of staff time necessary, a volunteer from the NAC or volunteer from the BCCI or volunteer obviously from our commission, because we have a lot of inside knowledge or expertise on the traffic calming program, kind of help as an advocate or help kind of, hey, just be aware, these are some pitfalls or these some hurdles you might run into. So I think, in future requests, we can kind of ask like, hey, is there anybody that wants to volunteer that lives in that neighborhood to help assist? Not necessarily take over, do the work, but just help assist if they run into questions or things besides just relying only on the staff liaison. And it may be a combination of a team of people, BCCI, NAC, and our commission, if, we live in that neighborhood or not, say, hey, you know what, we're happy to lend our experience or share, previous knowledge that we've encountered because of these situations. Like it may be like, oh, this could, expand to 200 or 300 residents, especially if there's like an apartment complex adjacent, or this could affect other things to just kind of help navigate. So I think that's a good idea going forward, is if people are willing to volunteer to help. I think there's a lot of people out there that do want to volunteer to help. That's why we're here on these meetings, that maybe it's a more focus to help. So that might be something going forward we can do.
Thank you. I think that this shows, as we've discussed, that there's a lot going on. And this is one thing that's interesting about this discussion, though, is that this is very different than the things that have come up before about putting in a bike lane, putting in a stop sign, adding a stop sign, removing a stop sign. It's pretty, I don't want to say cut and dry, because none of the discussions ever are, but what it comes down to in the process is pretty clear. This is a request. It comes before the commission. We vote to approve with changes or deny the motion. I mean, that's in the chair's statement. So that being said, this is much different because it is an entire process that obviously needs to have a holistic view to it. There's definitely some education from the community about who's involved in what. Where does the traffic calming project begin and end, and where does, as Sergeant Shaw pointed out, where does enforcement need to come down? And can you control an intersection at a school? Should you have to? Is traffic calming going to fix that? The number one thing again that came out of the visioning committee's whole deal was walkability and livability. They wanted to see all the sidewalks finished. They wanted to feel safe walking down the streets. That is more than just a traffic commission deal. That is everybody in the community getting together. That's the NACs and the BCCI doing exactly what we have asked them to do. And I think that the BCCI start with what Ms. Ethridge brought back was an excellent way to start. My question or my suggestion then to the meeting and to this commission then is, are we close enough to, I don't want to even say the word post, where we can have a subcommittee meeting and go through what are some of the processes, or how would we, obviously a quorum needs to happen. I think that was something that I heard, that a quorum needs to happen and we need to lower the voting, but you need to lower the voting to allow enough people, but you need to maintain a quorum to make sure that you're not run over by people on the side street not getting a vote and somebody else is able to change that. So there are definitely some balances that need to happen, and I think that work needs to begin. Are we close enough, or do we want to try and make changes as we go in bits and pieces? Mr. Khasho has pointed out before, you can change one thing, you don't need to change the whole thing, but it sounds like really this is a holistic view that really needs to go back through and say, let's take these items now and let's go back through and let's walk through the process and do that. That was the first step. The second one was, Mr. Khasho, does the commission have the ability to review a traffic calming project that did not pass? Just, I'm not saying we would, I'm just saying, is that a purview that either the city brings or somebody brings and says, can that be reviewed as a one-off instance while we work through the traffic calming rewrite?
Yeah, I don't get what you mean reviewed. I mean,
well, I think that the Commissioner or Vice Chair McClean or somebody there was the talk about, can they be handled on a one-on-one basis? What do you do? How far back, Commissioner Bobadilla, how far back would we go for items that had done? So in the interim, obviously, we are not going to solve this tonight. We are not going to, we have a lot of information that I think, and to me, and I think somebody made the comment, we've already made up our mind. I think we're open to everything, and obviously this shows that there is a much bigger issue. So
I think first we need to decide what we're gonna do with the percentage. That's the first issue
okay.
we need to resolve. Second is the voting or the project area. You would like to change the project area, to reduce it a little bit or keep it the same? That's the second step. After we decide on these two, we can bring back projects that did not pass, but I need to know, how far back you want to go. Commissioner McClean mentioned the projects that went through during COVID is legit to do. I mentioned maybe 2018 on, that's almost 3-4 years. If you have another opinion on it, but those were the most critical ones that they did not make it. I think 4 years is probably a good time. It's kind of matches what we have what we have on the ranking list, where the project could stay on the ranking list for 4 years. In a way, it makes sense. So whatever the commission would like to, to do, we're willing to entertain this. One thing, I still have to work with our public works director and city engineer for funding. We have to find some funding to implement those plans. If I believe, and don't take it 100%, that if we decide to go with the plans that got picked and we work with the neighborhoods on, those are doable. City operations will be able to construct speed humps. I mean, we need some funding, but it's not like doing concrete work and get into drainage and stuff. Those are easy to implement, and it's possible. We could ask the support of the city council for funding to implement those projects. So if we use plans that got picked but did not make it, if the commission decide to go that route, those are possible to do. The other option, if residents don't like those plans and they want to do something else, then we have to go through the process, but then it might take longer. It just will work with them on a plan to modify the plan.
Right. I think to Commissioner Bovadia's point, the 4 years that's a lot of change that can take place, especially in the communities. And how do you do kind of a touch base? It sounds like the first step that we do need to do though is establish a new decision between voting. I think we heard that over. I'm not sure or how my only concern is setting up a vote count that still maintains the quorum. And right now, I think that a 51% ballot change and you leave everything else the same is something that seems approachable. My only concern is, are we going to change it now and then change it later? And is it worth trying to fix something right away, or to have a meeting and let's go back and let's revamp the whole thing?
We need to go back and have a meeting regardless what we do. We have to bring the program itself and go through it, say we changed this wording to this, and we went through this process before.
Correct.
Yeah, so we have to follow that same process.
But
I mean, I just mentioned 51%. I mean, while we were talking for 2.5 hours, I was thinking of what else we can do. But it hit me again. There was a lot of concerns about the non-returned cards that are automatic. No. What if another option is, what if we say we need 67% of the total cards that sent out must come back. And out of those 67%, we require 67% yes, out of what comes back in, regardless. If the card does not come back, it doesn't get counted. So this way you drop the no vote because it's not returned. At least you get the majority, super majority of the cards back, but also you get the super majority of those cards that came back. So you're still, it could be close to 51%, at all of the total. But what here I'm trying to do, I'm trying to eliminate that the not returned card to be an automatic no.
Right. Thank you.
So if you'd like to think about the two options I mentioned, and if you have other ideas you would like, think about it. And the next meeting we could come back and we'll go through the program itself. We'll go through that section or other sections you would like to change, and we'll discuss it and do the changes. And then we'll bring it back as a TC item for adoption, and we'll adopt it and we'll go through the process. But I think the polling of the plan is the most important piece at this time that we need to resolve as quick as possible.
Correct.
That's the main thing. And if you wish to change the project area, if you want to take the side streets off, and let's say, unless it's a cul-de-sac, which they're considered part of that street because it's closed, then we will not include the side streets. This will reduce the number of cars that they go out. But on the other hand, I think about this, and what I've been hearing lately is people want to expand this area. They want that public involvement. So I'm struggling between the two, which way I want to go.
Well, and I think to your point there, Mr. Khasho, is that it's exactly the same as the commission has kind of gone through. We're trying to figure out what needs to happen, and the BCCI now has done this work and this kind of finger on the pulse, and I'd like to see some of that now that they've heard what's gone on. I'd like them to have that feedback, and we need to go through I think the identity of the balloting first. And I think what we need to do is not try and go through the entire process. We need to pick a key item and see if we can get through it in a meeting, because I feel that there are some parts that can become too big just for the one meeting.
Yeah.
I think that's the best the best approach, because I do know that, like you said, the cul-de-sac is in, cul-de-sac is out. How far down does the side street go? And again, I think the comment I made to somebody, to Annie, was that when I hear 130th or hear Wilson, and I play the devil's advocate, does that mean the whole street? Is that the entire run? I think when we talk about it, we need to make sure that we come up with what is the person who put it in? What does Kate feel was supposed to be the, what was the vision of what the scope is? When you say I need to fix 130th, what does that mean? Does that mean right in front of the park? Does that mean to the north side, to the south side? There's a lot of variables in there, and I would like to see us approach that with part of that workshop. And I believe then what I'm hearing is we need to take a look at the quorum piece first, and then we need to take a look at maybe the rest of it as part of the subcommittee, or does somebody feel differently? Because I think what I'd like to do is bring that back next meeting to be just a discussion about voting and the quorum, and just determine there. I like Mr. Khasho's idea of the 67% return, because you need to have a certain amount, otherwise we're not hearing everyone. And I think before we try and change other areas about scope and whatnot, the first thing to do is identify the voting of the projects and review how the data would fill in, because I think we've already seen that in a couple cases. Anyone else? Vice Chair McClean?
Yeah, I think definitely the polling and the voting is probably the top priority. I agree. We'd want to, resolve or decide on that first. Personally, I like all ideas. Every brainstorming is great. I don't like having 67% of 67%. I don't want to make it more complicated. I would prefer 51. 60. Let's say you had 100, 67, and then out of 67, that's like 45. So it's less than 51%. So I personally like the 51%. I also like, historically, from my just personal experiences, I like the higher thresholds. I just see in my head, and it's a lot of anecdotal, experience. You install a traffic calming and later we're taking it out, and talk about fleecing America. So I think we want that high bar. Maybe it's too high. I agree, but we want that to be at least my personal opinion is 51%. I really believe in some of these examples, and again, each neighborhood's different. If people voted yes instead of no, those return ballots would have not been that big of a deal. So I think, why are people voting no? People don't want traffic calming in their neighborhood. So are we wanting to lower that threshold so a smaller majority can get it pushed through even though people don't want it? I don't know. I'm just saying, I don't know if that's what we want to do. So I think it's a great conversation. I think it's the first thing. And we've had a lot of recent failures. I mean, we've had 23 or 25 work, since the 90s passed through, but in the last 4 years, we've had 4. So I think, the pandemic is related to 2 of those. That definitely could affect the participation. But even the ones pre-pandemic, there was, people not agreeing on the plan. So having more community involvement, getting a plan that everybody or majority agree on, I think is more success versus do we want to lower that bar? Not everybody agrees. And now we're, you have one person appealing to the city council to stop the traffic calming plan, so there's all these scenarios that could occur. So I think that, warrants discussion, but I definitely agree that's probably the first thing to tackle.
Thank you. Mr. Khasho, is that a possibility then for the next meeting?
Yeah, so what I heard is you would like to go with the 51% and just keep everything the same. The non-return cards will be a no vote still.
Well, I think
there's still a no vote, right? But go on, please, sir.
I would say, that's just my personal. I think I want to get every commissioner to give their opinion. I think the 51% or the 67% is the first thing to tackle. I have other suggestions that we want to do. I think some of these don't necessarily have to go into like having the letter in other languages. I don't think we have to put into the traffic calming. Some of those things might be like, we changed the card before, we changed the wording on the card before. So I think there are other suggestions we could discuss, but I agree that the voting percentage is probably the first thing.
Yeah,
right.
The language is on the card, we've done it for years. It came up, but we always do it. We make sure that everybody has the chance to understand what we're sending, and it's our job to do it.
I have
One
a
thing,
comment.
Yeah, Mr.
Commissioner Conway, I just want to make sure that I respectfully disagree with Commissioner McClean. So if what you were about to propose there, I'm like, no, I want further discussion options and other commissioners to chime on those options. Right now, I kind of felt like this is going to be the option. Let's vote on it, Commissioner.
Oh, no, I do not. No. That is not what's being said here at all. I think what we're saying is that it's the same thing we've had in discussions before. If someone does not make a proposal or does not say, this is what I think, then everybody sits around saying, okay, well, where do we start, right? Somebody has to say left or right. And you say, well, we'll go left. And you say, well, actually right's better because of this, okay? The same thing, because my follow-up question to the 51% was, do you still require a quorum number of votes? Do a certain number of people have to vote? Or do you just say, look, if you get 51% of yes votes, then I don't care whether they return a ballot as no or whether they vote and it's a no. If you don't get a certain number of votes, then this doesn't go through, right? To me, that's my concern. There has to be a certain number of votes all the time. And if you don't get that, then you're not here. So I don't believe anybody is suggesting. I think that we're just saying that the next meeting needs to focus on what does everybody have to bring? What do you think about this and how can we work it out?
I would like some options for the next time. I'm just like, and I think there's been a lot of stuff, but there's some consistency, such as like you're talking about percentages. Are we going to do 67, 51? I think there was some consistency about probably maybe narrowing it down, and we may not consider the side streets, or if we do, we may not need to go as far as 250 feet for the side streets. I think there's a lot of consistency there, but maybe it's just like option A, option B for us to consider. And
well, perfect. And I think what I know that Ms. Ethridge had some data that BCCI put together. I know she didn't have the best one from Miles. I think that that's information that definitely should come before the commission, because it's the same thing. What I'd like to see, and I had asked, I think probably not in the correct way before, I want to see a map of what Wilson is. There's a gentleman here who said there was 106 homes on Wilson. I tried to count, maybe I have the wrong information. I tried to count, I don't know how you get 106 ballots being sent out, right? And then Mr. Khasho actually noted that there were only 83. So perception, reality, who put it in, and what is the difference between the scope that is required on the street and the actual ballots, right? Because I think to Commissioner McClean's point, part of this would start if you had a row of homes that had 20 homes on it, you only need 11 people to sign it to get this thing going. But the ballots could conceivably be 60, 70, 80 ballots going out. So now I need 40 or 50 people to say yes to something that only took 11 people to get started, or homes. I'm oversimplifying. Those are the kind of information that I think, yes, if BCCI could provide that with the presentation they had, and we can have some other information, then I think, yes, the how we come up with that and everything is open is exactly what we should be doing.
Yeah, I can help resubmit that. Wilson is a difficult street because the two school districts represent a lot of frontage and the schools don't vote. And there is a lot of rental properties on that street. So there is actually 2 votes per household for rental properties, the renter and the owner.
Right, the owner had, and I think there was one comment in there somewhere about renters, or transient, and owners that are not in town are doing that. I think we've had that discussion in this very
commission. Probably have, yeah,
about that before, because condos, they're finding the majority of condos in Beaverton are now sub-leased, so the owner doesn't really care, and the person doesn't always get a vote, because we send information to the property owner. We don't always send it to the tenant, and this is one of the cases where we do. So
Wilson goes from Allen and it continues up past Hart and kind of snakes.
See, that's a huge swath of trying to get consensus for a huge neighborhood. So,
but the project was between Allen and Hart. It didn't go past Hart Road.
Allen and Hart was it, Jabra?
That's right. Allen and Hart. Right. what I can do or staff can do is we could take 2 or 3 projects of that did not pass and apply the 51%, how does it work? Apply the 67, how does it work? And this will give you an idea how things are. These are the 2 options that I just mentioned. If you have any other ideas that you have and you're not ready tonight, to discuss it, we could discuss it at the next meeting and then we'll decide on what we're going to go with. So,
yeah, but can I ask you what you think of the idea of when there is a failed project about circling back to see if some of the procedures that you use for lesser procedures can be applied and maybe result
I
in
think what we need to do though is I think, like was being said, we need to just collect some information and let's look it over. And even if we can't have all of this worked out next meeting, we need to have the data and get what we need. And let's start with that.
Yeah.
Okay. And will you let me know if I have some concerns about how the projects are if the projects are project.
I think the first step will just be the focus of the ballot count. We should address that and not try and take a large swath. That might have been over.
And you'll let us know if you progress beyond that to a point of looking.
I would hope that you'll attend every meeting and know absolutely without question. We invite and expect you to be here.
I would add that the 4 examples, they failed where in the part of the whole process, the whole program, they failed where they got consensus vote. If they did get 67%, then that plan would be presented to Traffic Commission for approval. So regardless of what happens with those 4 plans, they still have to come through the Traffic Commission. We have an open hearing. Anybody that's for or against can go to that process meeting to discuss. So I think we definitely need to identify if we want to modify the traffic calming program, not just for these 4, but in the future, that if something fails or doesn't meet a certain participation criteria, what do we do with that? Do we just say, no, they're out of luck? Or do we say, hey, let's table this and revisit it? I think that's something, again, we'd want to, maybe add to the program going forward. But maybe, if we change other things like participation, 51% or other, parts of that, maybe that's not an issue going forward. So I don't.
I think that would help, Ms. Ethridge would be, and real quick then Commissioner Bobadilla, would be, we need to understand, let's start with those 4 examples and tell us why you think they failed. Not when a no is a no or they didn't do. Participation was the key and consensus. Was there participation and was there consensus? And if there wasn't, why do you think that failed? Because that's really the starting point that we need to do with that. And that's why we need to gather the information so that we can start that out. Commissioner Bobadilla, did you have a?
Yeah, just quick comment, Jabra. I would really appreciate more simplicity instead of complexity, in the sense that if we're going to do 67%, then the second is 67% instead of, I'm just giving a hypothetical. Let's not go to 67% and then the majority needs to be 51%. That just seems so much more confusing and everything. If we just leave it 51% and then it's 51, I would just ask for more simplicity. I think that's what everybody wants, even the public, is simplicity.
I like simplicity too, but I was trying to take out the non-returned cards to be counted as, because a lot of people were concerned about this particular issue.
Yeah,
I agree. I was trying just to, to make it simple, but also, that it will make sense that the majority still wants the project. It's not just.
No, I agree with, and I actually was doing the calculation just here earlier when you were saying that about a 67% and then even a 67%, I was just doing a hypothetical. It still works out pretty good, given the number that you had thrown out. I think that like 89 or whatever the number was that people responded. It would have, I calculated that it would have meant only about 44 people would have needed to have agreed and it could have passed. If it's only based on what's received, like you indicated.
So at the end, it will add up to almost 50%, 51%.
Yeah.
If you do both. but I'm trying to eliminate the perception, of that no vote, and that's not how they do voting. And so I'm just trying to eliminate that issue that people keep bringing up. And
when I think one part of that, and because we've talked about these cards, because the card says if you don't mail this back, you are essentially voting no. Now, maybe they never opened their mail, so they never read the card. But if I did open the mail and I read that card, I can vote no and mail it back, or I can not mail it back and vote no. So I think that, we had this conversation years ago about what should or should not be on the card. We're fighting education. We don't know why people's behavior, why they're doing things. But I think that's something we could also look at in addition to the voting. The voting is the top thing, but we could also revisit, how those cards are communicated or what information's on them. And then we talked about besides mailing, if it's SurveyMonkey or online or whatever, having an easier forum for them to be able to submit an opinion or a comment or vote on those type of things. Because it may be, it's like, I want to vote yes if everyone else votes yes, but if everyone else votes no, then I'm this. So it's like there's all these weird caveats when we get into those unique details that maybe a yes or no card isn't the best form. Maybe more multiple options. It's like we have 3 plans, vote 1, 2, 3. Whatever plan has the most votes wins. And again, that's more work for your staff. I'm not suggesting that. It's just more of a brainstorm type of idea where we all want something, but we just can't agree on what we want.
Yeah, it's just we need the tool to connect with the residents, and that's the important thing. And we're going to look into something that we could do it, and also we have to check with legal. How does it work?
Yeah, because sometimes some of the language and stuff that you guys use, Jabra, is engineering language. You might get it and it comes easy and the mathematical problem seems great, but not for the average Joe.
Right. So those are things that those are things I'd like to see us collect and consider and ponder, and let's bring them back and discuss that on how to resolve that. And again, I think the biggest thing to start with will be the information, the BCCI. They will have another meeting before our next meeting. So I know that they'll take this and have a discussion and bring back some more information for us. I fully expect that as well. And then Axe will feed into that and we'll keep going. So with that in mind, we'll the next step then, Mr. Khasho, would be next month's meeting will be a discussion of the quorum part, or do we need, how specific do we need to list that for you?
I felt some of the commissioner would like to bring more ideas than what I just mentioned the two.
Absolutely.
And we could, it doesn't need to take, 2 hours to discuss. We say, okay, this is what we have, and we'll pick one.
Right.
One thing I did not mention, there was a lot of talk about the 67% required for removal of traffic calming devices. The current process, the 67%, it's a petition. Somebody will go around, sign a petition, and 67% of people who live, even you could take one traffic calming device out, and you need to go 250 feet on each side on that street and get signatures. And 67% of those people need to say yes on the petition. But that doesn't mean the traffic calming device is coming out. It means it qualifies for a hearing by the Traffic Commission for the removal of that traffic calming device. And I don't know, Chairman Conway, if you were on the commission when one time we had one neighborhood that the lady collected actually signatures. The neighbors agreed with her that she can take the island in front of their home out so she can get in and out easier than with the island. We held the hearing, and at the Traffic Commission hearing, all the neighbors flipped on her. They changed their mind and they decided no, they want to keep the island. And the Traffic Commission said, okay, due to the testimony we received, we're not going to remove the island. So that's how the removal works.
All right.
Yeah,
yep,
so we could keep the removal the way it is. We don't need to mess with it. It's
right. Yep, there's definitely a consideration for that too about I think that's the same as funding, putting them in and taking them out. I think the point to the city council was that if we change this and there are more traffic calming projects approved, then they are willing to put the funding in, is what I heard. So that should not be a concern for us. But Yes, then let's do that next time we meet, and we will work on that then. And now, typically we've not met in July because we're too close to the 4th of July holiday. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's
Which might be the appropriate way to go in this case, because BCCI would then have time to do another round with the NACs if we were to meet in August.
so. Would you like to meet in August? I mean,
Well, I'm sorry. I'll leave that up to discussion because I didn't think of that until we just said it. But typically we have not met in July because we're too close to the 4th of July holiday, and it's we either don't have enough people or
yeah, the bylaws. I can't remember the day before or after in the bylaws. I have to check the bylaws that we cannot have a meeting. But if you would like to wait till August, this will give you more time to think about it, and it will give more time for the BCCI to get their connections if they need to provide input on it. If you would like to go that route, we can. And I have to check the bylaws to see, if we can have a meeting in July or not, too.
Okay,
Well, as far as the voting process is concerned, we already have had those discussions. I can tell you that 5 of the 9 NACs held a vote, 2 did not hold a vote, 2 did not have quorums for a vote. Are you wanting me to go back and ask again for voting preferences?
I think what I would like to see is that everyone agrees that the process needs to change. And what we're looking for now is, what do you feel is a fair way? Everybody said the quorum, I think some of them said between 51 and 67. I think we're now ready for more specific details and thoughts, because we'll come up with our own discussion on that. But I think it would be appropriate to hear now that we're into this and we've agreed that we need to change this and update it, and we're going to revamp this, and everyone has agreed that we kind of go forward. If not, if nobody else, sorry, one quick thing, Commissioner Urbanski.
Konnette, could you make your PowerPoint presentation available to the commissioners, because you covered a lot of good points and I don't remember them all.
Yes, I will. I'll get together with Miles and send out the
I think, if
version.
Miles can send that to Ms. Warner, then she will send that out as part of, that's the correct
I
way
already
to go.
have. I already have it.
Thank you.
Very
And
good.
the tables that are there, the statistics came from the city.
Okay,
and
perfect.
From Jabra.
So in that case, then I still think that given the holiday schedule and the time and the impact, that everybody should take time to look at that and consider what's going on. And we've agreed that we are going to look at this, and so it's not something that we're saying, well, that was nice, let's move on. We've agreed that this needs to be updated and changed. But in addition to the quorum work, I believe that if we take the time and look at this, we can also say, okay, what are the other aspects of this that need to change? The side streets, the scope obviously was an association with it. Maybe that needs to be taken in tandem, or maybe that needs to be taken separately. But in my opinion, I think that we should take the time and consider that and pull that in. And since it sounds like it's already been included in the slide presentation, then we don't really need that. I was just thinking that there might be more information or considerations. But now that we're doing this, then Ms. Ethridge, then yeah, we totally believe that BCCI and the NACs will follow along with those that were interested and concerned about how we can best facilitate this process, especially in a productive way as well.
You mean about the quorum?
Yeah, about all of it. Obviously, we heard a lot of things tonight that were more than that, right? Where's the traffic commission begin? Where's traffic calming begin, and where does it end, right? That was obviously there were some feelings that it's bigger than that, but it's also compartmentalized. And as Commissioner Bobadilla said, there are legal aspects about some of it that you can and can't do, and the purview of one thing is not the other, right? So those all need to be taken into account. And the same with the vision committee, right? The vision committee's view of what was supposed to happen. We would love to see that. All right.
One quick question, then I'll let Mr. Khasho go. Mr. Khasho, this is more like a hypothetical, or the feasibility. If the idea came that, let's say, traffic calming project, exceeded, let's say 100 houses or 50 houses, and we required that to be two separate traffic calming projects. Obviously, I don't want to add a lot of additional work to your work already, but what's the feasibility? Let's say like Wilson or 130th, there's 6 long streets. We're like, okay, instead of this as one big traffic calming, we're going to split this in half and have it as 2 projects. What's like the pros and cons or the feasibility if that's something that's even possible?
We've done this in the past, where the street was too long, and we said, okay, some neighborhoods say we want this because there'll be some disagreement on the devices, and they don't want it to be all as one project. So we split it, we say, okay, you vote on this piece and you vote on this piece, but the piece that does not make it, it will not be constructed. So only that piece that makes it will go through. And we've done it in the past. Yeah, it can be done on long streets. Yeah.
Oh, thanks. That's all. I was just curious.
Yeah.
Thank you.
One comment I have about the meeting is the meeting will happen on July 1st if we're going to have a meeting in July. So per the bylaws, it's allowed to happen. So if the commissioners feel they would like to continue the process quick, we could have a meeting in July.
Thoughts? Anyone?
Vote or what? I'm in town. I'm good.
No, I'm just an informal straw poll of, is that something, do you need, should we take more time and do this, or should we just head right into it? And that's, I think, one of the, I'm just trying to think. I don't want to put it off a long time, but at the same time, there's a lot of stuff to consider in here. So I could go either way with that. Commissioner, Vice Chair McClean, any thoughts?
Either way, it really does not matter to me. Whatever.
Then let's at least go ahead and have a discussion then next month. We'll, in that case, then limit it to a scope of voting, and we'll take the other pieces later on. I don't believe that the first pass we should try and do anything large then, and we may not get through it because we may find that this scope needs to be addressed in addition to how do you need a quorum if you limit the scope, or do you not need that if you leave it as is? What do you leave as is now? I'm just really concerned. My only concern about trying to get this quickly is we're going to put something in and then change it in a month or two after that because another part needs to be modified. So that's the only disclaimer I think on that.
Chair Conway, I really appreciate what you suggested. I like that idea. I like the idea of one thing only being really our focus for the next meeting. So hopefully we can attack it and come to an agreement, and then later on go to the next one. Because if not, personally, like, there's a lot of great information, but it then becomes overwhelming and we won't get much accomplished. Personally, I like that. To me, like, this is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to focus. Think about that.
All right. So, Mr. Khasho, then if we could have a meeting on July 1st, and we will discuss, unless something comes up where there are not enough people unforeseen that cannot make it due to a quorum, then we will have that meeting, and the focus will just be a discussion of how to address, and we won't call it a quorum. We'll just call it how to address the voting aspect.
Okay. Sounds good.
Okay, very good. Is there anything else? Was there any final old business, sir?
No, I don't have any.
Okay, and anyone have any new business to bring other than what we've been discussing? Perfect then. All right, with that in mind then, July 1st, let us know if you are not able to attend as quick as possible. If you cannot, then we will not have a quorum. We will not have a meeting, but if we have enough to have a quorum, then I think we should plan to consider that. All right, any final thoughts? Otherwise, thank you, we're adjourned. Ms. Warner, thank you so much for your help. Sergeant Shaw, always, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. And everybody else, thank you so much. Mr. Khasho, you patience as well. And Ms. Ethridge, thank you for all of the input and work. I think that we should have for everyone that attended and everyone that took the time to spoke and follow through on the whole meetings. There's a huge amount of information from BCCI and from the NAC. And
thanks for your attention.
You bet. All right. See everybody later.
Thank you.